The cellar door gave way so suddenly that Mara nearly went down with it. Snow slid off the slanted bulkhead in a white sheet. She caught herself on one knee, swore into Grandma Ruth's red scarf, and tightened her grip on the amber work lantern. The door lay open beneath the right end of the lodge's lake-facing porch, revealing stone steps that descended into darkness. Then warm air touched her face. Not hot, not miraculous, just damp and unmistakably warm, rising into the blue November dusk, while fresh snow hissed against it and vanished. Vapor curled around Mara's gloved hand. She lowered the lantern, and its light found old copper pipes running along the cellar wall, each one beaded with condensation. Behind her, the 12-room lodge stood frozen and silent. Frost coated the upstairs windows from within. Beyond the broad porch, the mountain lake had turned to a sheet of bruised blue ice. But under Mara's boots, something was still moving. She leaned over the stairwell, gray-green eyes stinging from cold and exhaustion. "What did you do, Grandma?" There was no answer. Ruth had been dead 9 days. Mara had spent 3 of those days being told she had no home, 2 being told she had no sense, and most of that afternoon wondering whether both things were true. Now the lodge everyone had called worthless was breathing warm vapor into the snow. 9 days earlier, Mara had awakened to the sound of Aunt Denise opening the curtains. Not drawing them, opening them with judgment. The rings scraped along the rod in Grandma Ruth's bedroom, and weak morning light fell across the stripped hospital bed. The sheets were gone. The water glass from the nightstand was gone. Even the paper bag of lemon drops Ruth had kept in the drawer was gone. Mara lay curled on the narrow sofa by the wall, still wearing yesterday's charcoal sweater. For 3 years she had slept there whenever Ruth had a bad night. She no longer woke when the furnace clicked or the refrigerator dumped ice. She woke when Ruth's breathing changed. That morning the room was silent except for the curtain rings and Denise's efficient movements. "You'll hurt your back sleeping like that," Denise said. Mara stared at the empty bed, bit late to worry about it. Denise turned. She wore black slacks and a cream blouse, funeral clothes without the jacket. Her blonde-gray hair had been shaped and sprayed into place before 8 in the morning. That alone felt obscene. "I'm trying to help," she said. "You took down her pictures. The photographer is coming Thursday." Mara pushed herself upright. Her left arm had gone numb beneath her. What photographer? For the listing. The word hung there. Listing. As if Ruth had died inside a piece of inventory. Denise smoothed the curtain with both palms. "This house costs money every day it sits. Heat, insurance, taxes. We need to be practical. We buried her yesterday, and the bills didn't get buried with her." Mara looked toward the dresser. A clean rectangle showed where Ruth's framed photograph of the mountain lodge had stood. In it, Ruth had been 50-something and sun-browned, holding a trout in one hand and a cast-iron skillet in the other, because she claimed a guest had interrupted breakfast to make her pose. Mara had always suspected Ruth invented half that story. "Where's the picture?" she asked. "Packed." "Where?" "With the other things. That really narrows it down." Denise exhaled through her nose. She had been doing that around Mara since Mara was 16, the sound of a woman confronted by an appliance that worked but made an irritating noise. "There's coffee downstairs," she said. "We should talk." Mara glanced at the clock beside the empty bed. The green digits showed 8:12. At 8:13, she remembered there was no reason to check whether Ruth had taken her morning pills. At 8:14, she remembered it again. Downstairs, 3 cardboard boxes waited by the back door. Mara stopped on the final step. Her forest green parka lay folded across the top box. Her brown boots stood beside it. Someone had tucked the loose laces neatly inside. Denise was already at the kitchen table, arranging papers beside 2 mugs. Grant leaned against the counter, eating one of Ruth's bran muffins. He wore a quilted vest over a blue button-down shirt and held the muffin over his cupped palm so he wouldn't drop crumbs on himself. Mara stared at it. Grant noticed. "What?" "Those were in the freezer." "Were they?" "She made them." Okay. She made them before she got too sick to stand at the counter. Grant looked at the half-eaten muffin as though this information had altered its chemical composition. Then he took another bite. "They're dry," he said. Mara laughed once. She didn't mean to. It came out sharp enough that Denise flinched. "Sit down," Denise said. "I'd rather stand." "Mara." The tone still had the power to make her feel 14, even though she was 25 and had spent the last year lifting Denise's mother out of a bathtub because Denise said her lower back couldn't manage it. She sat. Denise pushed a mug toward her. The coffee had milk in it. Mara hadn't used milk since college. "We have to get the house ready," Denise began. "Grant has arranged for the yard cleanup and I'm meeting the agent Thursday. You've had a great deal on you, and this is probably a good time for a clean start." Mara looked at the boxes again. One had towels written across it in Ruth's blocky handwriting. Apparently, Denise had found an old moving box and decided the word was close enough to granddaughter. "How clean?" Mara asked. Denise folded her hands. "I need you moved out by Wednesday evening." Grant brushed crumbs into the sink. Most of them missed. "Wednesday," Mara repeated. "The storm isn't supposed to hit until Thursday night. The forecast changed. It always changes. They're saying the first hard freeze could come tomorrow." Denise's expression tightened, not from concern, but from the inconvenience of having weather introduced into a conversation she had already settled. "Then you'll want to get on the road early." "To where?" Neither of them answered immediately. That was the part Mara would remember. Not being told to leave. The pause after she asked where she was expected to go. Grant finally opened a cabinet, looked inside, and said, "What about that friend you stayed with after college? Lena lives in North Carolina." "Right. That's far." "Yes, Grant. It remains far." Denise reached across the table. Mara moved her hand before Denise could cover it. "No one is throwing you into the street," Denise said. "My belongings are beside the door. Because I packed them for you, you packed them while I was asleep in Grandma's room." I knew this would be emotional. That was Denise's gift. She could take another person's pain, label it emotion, and thereby make it their failure of management. Mara looked at the papers. Utility summaries, an insurance statement, a handwritten list of Ruth's property with circles beside some items. The townhouse was at the top. Denise's name appeared beside it. Below that were Ruth's checking and savings accounts. Grant. The two vehicles. Grant. At the bottom, almost as an afterthought, someone had written Lodge Valley Property. A question mark sat beside it. "What's this?" Mara asked, though she knew. Denise followed her gaze. "The lodge is still part of the estate. You said Grandma sold it." "I said she should have sold it." Grant opened the refrigerator, found nothing he wanted, and let the door swing shut. "It's basically unsellable. It's a 12-room lodge on a lake. It's a 12-room lawsuit on a lake. The place hasn't operated in years. Pipes are probably shot. Roof might be bad. Road access is seasonal. The roof was replaced." Grant smiled. "When?" 1987. 14 years ago. Ancient history. Mara knew because she'd been 11 when Ruth made her collect roofing nails with a magnet tied to a broom handle. She had earned a penny for each nail and then discovered Ruth had salted the yard with extras to keep her busy. Denise tapped one page. "There's also the question of taxes and maintenance. The heating system was always peculiar. Grandma used it until 3 winters ago. Your grandmother used many things past the point of reason." Grant pulled out a chair and sat backward on it. "Look, if we unload the house, the cars, all that, there should be enough to make everybody comfortable." "Everybody? You know what I mean." Mara did. In the last 18 months, she had spent almost $11,000 of her own savings on Ruth's care. Prescriptions when insurance delayed, groceries, a replacement water heater, gas for appointments in Bozeman. She'd kept receipts at first, then stopped because every receipt felt like an accusation she never intended to make. Denise had thanked her often. Grant had once sent $200 in a text that read, "For Grandma stuff." Now he reached for the second frozen muffin. "You weren't left out," Denise said softly. "You lived here without paying rent." Mara felt the words enter her more cleanly than any shouted insult could have. She had cooked, cleaned, changed dressings, tracked medication, argued with billing departments, repaired the porch rail, and learned to sleep in 90-minute pieces. Denise had depended on her so completely that she had stopped seeing dependence at all. "Right," Mara said. Denise mistook the quiet for agreement. "We're proposing a voluntary division. It keeps things simple. I take responsibility for the house and preparing it for sale. Grant handles the accounts and vehicles. If you truly want the lodge, its assessed share can be assigned to you." Grant gave a short laugh. "Nobody truly wants the lodge." Mara looked again at the empty question mark. She saw Ruth at the service kitchen sink, sleeves rolled past strong brown forearms. Ruth teaching her to make beds with hospital corners because guests kicked loose sheets into ropes. Ruth unlocking the lodge at 5 in the morning because a plow driver needed coffee. Ruth standing on the lake-facing porch, sniffing the wind, saying snow had different smells depending on whether it meant business. Mara also saw the 3 boxes by the door. "What happens if I take it?" she asked. Denise blinked. "The lodge? What happens? You'd assume the property taxes and upkeep, and it would be mine, if that's the division we agree to." Grant tore the paper liner from the muffin. "For about 6 weeks." "Grant," Denise murmured, but she was smiling into her coffee. Mara stood, carried the untouched mug to the sink, and poured it out. "I'll take the lodge." By late afternoon the next day, she was driving southwest with everything she owned packed into Ruth's old station wagon. Snow feathered across the highway. The heater blew lukewarm air at her knees, and the fuel gauge trembled just above a quarter tank. Denise had watched from the townhouse doorway as Mara loaded the last box. "You can still reconsider," she had called. Mara had shut the wagon's hatch. "Which part?" Denise crossed her arms against the cold. For half a second she looked tired instead of certain. "All of it," she said. Then Grant came outside carrying a ring of keys, and the moment closed. The mountain road narrowed after sunset. Mara lost cell service 10 miles from the turnoff. At the valley entrance, a drift caught the wagon's undercarriage and made a sound like a shovel dragged across concrete. She almost turned around. Instead, she drove on until the lodge emerged beside the frozen lake, its timber walls dark above the stone foundation, its porch buried, its upper windows blind with frost. The front lock resisted before opening. Inside, the cold was deeper than outdoors because it had settled and stayed. Mara tried light switches. Nothing. She found the breaker panel, restored power to 2 downstairs circuits, and heard a refrigerator hum in the service kitchen. The boiler controls lit, but the upstairs pipes remained silent. She searched for valves as daylight failed. That search took her outside, around the porch, and down onto one knee before the snow-covered bulkhead. Now, with warm vapor touching her face, Mara descended the stone steps. The cellar thermometer read 56 degrees. Old copper pipes crossed the rear wall, entering from the uphill wooded slope. One line trembled faintly beneath her glove. Water moved inside it with the soft, steady sound of someone breathing in sleep. A violent knock echoed overhead. Mara raised the lantern. Somewhere in the frozen lodge, a pipe had just shifted or split. Her phone found one bar long enough to receive a message from Denise. "If it's unmanageable, Grant may be willing to take it off your hands." Mara read it twice. Then she looked at the wet copper, the warm stone, and the narrow stairway leading back into the cold. She typed with numb fingers, "I just got here." The message showed, "Delivered before the single bar vanished." Another knock sounded above her, followed by a thin metallic rattle. Mara shoved the phone into her parka and climbed back into the lodge. The temperature difference at the top of the stairs hit like an open freezer. Her lantern threw amber shapes across the mudroom walls as she listened. Nothing. Then came a faint ticking from the ceiling. She followed it through the service kitchen. Ruth's old stainless steel work tables stood beneath white sheets, their outlines ghostly in the dimness. The range was cold, its 8 burners filmed with dust. A row of hooks still held 3 dented pans, all tilted at precisely the same angle. The ticking grew louder near the dining room. Mara lifted the lantern. A dark spot was spreading across the ceiling. Oh no! Water gathered at the center, swelled, and dropped onto the long pine table. Another drop followed, then another. She ran upstairs. The hallway runner cracked beneath her boots where damp had frozen into it. She passed doors with brass numbers, 3, 4, 5, until she heard water spraying behind number 6. The knob wouldn't turn. Mara hit the door with her shoulder. It held. She hit it again, harder, and pain flashed down her arm. "Perfect," she muttered. "My inheritance is beating me up." On the 3rd strike, the swollen wood gave. The door flew inward and bounced off the wall. A thin stream of water shot from a split in the radiator pipe, struck the wallpaper, and froze in translucent ridges beneath the window. It was not much water, but somewhere below, the system was pushing more into the line. Mara grabbed the radiator valve. It refused to move. She tried again with both hands, teeth clenched, until the corroded wheel bit through her glove. The pipe hissed at her. Fine. She ran back to the cellar. The warm loop entered through the rear stone wall and crossed behind an old insulated tank. From there, the plumbing branched into a confusion of copper lines, iron valves, and faded tags whose pencil marks had blurred with age. One thick pipe stayed warm beneath her palm. Another was cold enough to burn. Ruth had taught Mara how to drain guest room radiators when she was 19. But that had involved Ruth standing beside her, saying things like, "Not that one, unless you want a bath." Mara held the lantern close to the valves. "Which one didn't you want me to touch?" Condensation ran down a pipe and dripped from her glove. She chose the valve connected to the cold return line. It wouldn't move. She braced one boot against the stone wall and leaned into it. The wheel gave a shriek, turned half an inch, then stopped. Upstairs, something clanged. Mara found a length of pipe on a workbench and slipped it over the valve handle for leverage. The wheel moved again, slowly this time. As she closed it, the murmur in the lines faded. She waited. No knock. No hiss. When she returned to room 6, the spray had weakened to a thread. She wrapped the split pipe in a towel, set the room's metal wastebasket beneath it, and watched the towel darken. Her shoulder throbbed. Melted snow had soaked through one knee of her work pants. A strand of dark auburn hair had frozen to her cheek. She sank onto the edge of the bare mattress. The lodge made another sound, a deep wooden groan that traveled from roof to foundation. It was not the sharp complaint of breaking metal. It was simply an old building settling under new snow. Mara knew that sound. She had heard it while lying awake in room 2 at 17, after Ruth caught her sneaking vodka from the pantry and sentenced her to inventory every fitted sheet in the lodge. She had heard it at 20. During the last winter, the place hosted guests, when a storm stranded 6 utility workers, and Ruth slept in a chair so Mara could have the final bed. "You're not dying tonight," Mara told the lodge. The lodge declined to promise anything. She spent the next hour opening faucets and finding whatever water would still drain. The kitchen tap coughed rust before going dry. 2 downstairs toilets were intact. A third had a cracked tank. In the upstairs hall bath, the sink trap had split and left a frozen puddle shaped like a silver tongue. At midnight, she carried her boxes into the warm cellar storeroom. It had no windows, but the stone walls were dry. Shelves held empty, preserving jars, mouse-chewed paper sacks, and a coffee tin full of bent screws. She spread a wool blanket over an old cot, kept her sweater and parka on, and wrapped Ruth's scarf over her ears. Dinner was a packet of crackers, half a jar of peanut butter, and snow melted in a saucepan on a single electric hot plate. She ate sitting on an upside-down milk crate while the old copper line murmured on the other side of the wall. There was comfort in the sound until she remembered Ruth had died without telling her it was still here. During Ruth's last winter, Mara had asked about the lodge twice. The first time, Ruth had closed her eyes and said, "That place asks too much." The second time, when Mara suggested they drive out in spring, Ruth had replied, "Spring's muddy." Mara had accepted both answers because dying people were allowed to be evasive. Now she wondered if Ruth had been protecting her from the lodge, or the lodge from her, or simply postponing one more impossible decision until there was no time left to make it. She slept badly. Every noise became a burst pipe. Every silence became the thermal line stopping. Shortly before dawn, she dreamed Ruth was upstairs ringing the little brass bell she used during her final months. Mara climbed toward the sound, but every door opened into the same frozen room. She woke with her hand reaching into darkness. The cellar was 55 degrees, warm enough that the scarf around her ears felt ridiculous, cold enough that removing it felt disloyal. She dressed by lantern light, climbed outside, and found 8 inches of fresh snow on the porch. The storm had erased her tire tracks. The lake and sky were nearly the same white-gray, divided only by a line of dark trees at the far shore. Snow sat on the station wagon's hood like bread dough. Mara cleared the windshield with her sleeve, got in, and turned the key. The engine clicked. She tried again. Click. Don't do this. Click. She rested her forehead against the steering wheel. Ruth's wagon smelled faintly of peppermint and motor oil. Mara could almost hear her saying that machines did not respond to pleading because it encouraged them. The battery indicator on Mara's phone showed 12%. Reception appeared only when she stood at the far edge of the porch with one arm raised. She called Grant first. It rang 6 times before going to voicemail. "Hi," Mara said. "The wagon won't start. If you're still in town and can bring the portable jump pack from Grandma's garage, I'd appreciate it." She ended the call before adding anything that would make ignoring her easier. Denise answered on the 3rd ring. "Are you all right?" The speed of the question startled Mara. For the moment. "What does that mean? The car battery's dead. Do you still have Grandma's jump pack?" "I think Grant took the garage equipment. I called him. He may be busy. He ate 2 frozen muffins while evicting me. I'm comfortable interrupting his schedule." Denise went quiet. Wind pushed loose snow over the porch and around Mara's boots. "I didn't evict you," Denise said. Mara closed her eyes. "Can we not rename it right now? I gave you several days. You gave me boxes. You chose to leave early. The weather chose that." Denise sighed. "This is exactly what concerned me, Mara. You're alone in an unheated building with no reliable transportation. The cellar's warm." "What?" "I found the old thermal loop." Another pause. This one was different. "I thought Ruth shut that system down," Denise said. "She didn't. Is it safe?" "I don't know yet. You need to come back." Mara looked through the porch posts at the blank road. "To where?" "You know what I mean?" "No, I actually don't." Denise's voice softened. "We would work something out." The offer might have moved Mara if it had contained a noun. A room, a week, a place. Instead, it hung between them like fog. "I need the jump pack," Mara said. "I'll call Grant." Denise hung up without saying goodbye. Mara's phone dropped to 10%. Inside the service kitchen, she searched drawers for matches and found a red plastic scraper, a bundle of rubber bands gone brittle, and 6 takeout menus from restaurants that no longer existed. On the wall beside the pantry hung a corkboard hidden beneath a curled calendar from 4 years earlier. Most of the pinned cards had faded. One remained legible because it was printed in thick blue ink. Bell Plowing, Inez Bell, Valley Roots. Below the number, Ruth had written, in pen, "Pay on Fridays, even if she says Tuesday is fine." Mara smiled despite herself. Inez answered with engine noise roaring behind her. "Bell. Is this Inez Bell? That depends who wants money. Mara Hale." The engine noise changed pitch. "Ruth's Mara." Mara's throat tightened at the wording. "Yes. I heard about Ruth. I'm sorry. Thank you." "You at the lodge?" "Yes." That was fast. I had some encouragement. Inez gave a short, dry laugh. "Denise?" Mara stepped closer to the window. You know my aunt. I've met Weather before, too. Mara pressed her lips together, but the laugh escaped anyway. It felt strange and almost painful. My battery's dead, she said. Do you have a jump pack? I plow snow. I don't conduct roadside miracles. So that's a no. How much snow? 8 inches, maybe 10 in the drift. Road open? It was yesterday. Useful answer. I haven't had coffee. More useful answer. Inez asked where the wagon was parked, what direction its nose faced, and whether Mara had blocked the turn circle. Mara looked through the kitchen window and realized she had. Maybe a little. Move it. The battery's dead. I know. I'm enjoying the circle we've made. Inez said she would reach the lodge after clearing 2 contract roads. Her price was high enough that Mara checked whether she had heard correctly. That includes the road? Mara asked. That includes today's road. Winter is a repeating product. I can't pay that every time it snows. Then you can't keep that road open. The words were not cruel. That made them harder to dismiss. I can pay today, Mara said. Good. Put coffee on. The water's shut off. A long silence followed. You got heat? Not upstairs. The cellar loop is warm. The old gravity line? You knew about it? Ruth used to warm bread dough down there. Mara looked toward the cellar door. It's keeping the pipes from freezing below grade. It was supposed to do more than that. Something failed. Something always fails right after the person who knows its name is gone. Inez arrived 2 hours later behind a red plow truck that threw snow in bright wings. She was a compact woman in her late 50s with silver hair braided down the back of a navy coverall. She jumped the wagon, then left the cables attached while the engine charged. Only after Mara paid her did Inez take a slow look at the lodge. You picked the hard half, she said, so everyone keeps telling me. They're not wrong just because they're annoying. Inez climbed the porch steps, stamping snow from her boots. Inside, she stood perfectly still, listening. The upper circulator isn't running, she said. You can hear that. I can't hear it. Mara showed her room 6, the closed valve in the cellar, and the warm line entering from the wooded slope. Inez touched one copper pipe, then another. Cal Mercer installed the last pump with Ruth, she said. He'll know which mistakes are original and which ones were improvements. Will he come? If you ask him. Will he answer? Inez glanced at her. If I ask him. Mara waited. Inez's mouth twitched. Coffee first. Even bad coffee has a process. Inez found the lodge's old percolator in the cabinet beneath the service sink. You have grounds? She asked. 1 packet of instant. Inez stared at Mara. I didn't plan to host a breakfast rush. You planned to live here. I planned to arrive here. I hadn't gotten much further. That shows. She filled the percolator from a gallon jug she carried behind the plow seat, then dumped in coffee from a dented tin in her emergency kit. Apparently, Inez prepared for snow, dead batteries, and other people's poor decisions with equal thoroughness. The range was still useless, so they set the pot on Mara's hot plate. It took 20 minutes to produce something dark enough to qualify. Inez tasted it and frowned. What? Ruth would have thrown this at the wall? Grandma drank coffee that could strip paint. She understood ratios. She understood threats. Inez took another sip. That too. Cal Mercer arrived while Mara was trying to dislodge a frozen sheet from the dining room floor. She had warmed the edges with a hairdryer plugged into an extension cord, a method that was slow, undignified, and working. A truck door slammed outside. Inez looked through the window. Be polite. You've been insulting my coffee for 40 minutes. I'm not the one you need. The man who entered was tall, but carried himself with the slight forward bend of someone accustomed to basements. He had a narrow brown face, a gray mustache, and canvas coveralls stained in several colors no ordinary laundry would acknowledge. A canvas tool bag hung from one hand. He stopped in the service kitchen and looked around. Smells the same, he said. Cold? Mara asked. Onions. There haven't been onions in here for years. Cal glanced toward the pantry. building remembers. Inez pointed at Mara, Ruth's granddaughter. We've met. Mara studied him. Have we? You were about 20. You called me a fossil. That doesn't sound like me. You also called the boiler a steam-powered dinosaur. That does. Cal set the tool bag on a work table. Ruth agreed with you, which was irritating because she'd hired me to keep it alive. Inez poured coffee into a thick white mug. Cal tasted it, looked at her and said, "You losing your touch?" It's her hot plate. I'm not sure electricity changes the recipe. Mara watched them over the edge of her own cup. Their teasing carried the ease of people who had worked beside each other long enough to know which complaints were invitations. It made the vast kitchen feel briefly occupied. Then Cal turned toward her. "Show me what broke." He did not begin by opening his tools. He made Mara lead him through the lodge and explain what she had found, what she had touched, and what she had shut down. In room 6, he crouched beside the split radiator pipe without removing his gloves. "You closed the cold return?" "I think so." "You think so?" The spray stopped. That's an outcome, not an answer. Mara felt herself stiffen. It was the valve connected to the return line. Better. He pressed the towel wrapped around the split. It had frozen solid. Any other leaks? Dining room ceiling, upstairs hall sink trap, toilet tank downstairs. Those are the ones you can see. I know. Do you? Inez, standing in the doorway, said, "Cal, what? You sound like yourself." He rose with a grunt. "Somebody has to." Back in the cellar, Cal removed his coat and hung it from a pipe Mara was fairly sure should not support clothing. He put one hand on the warm thermal line where it entered through the rear stone wall. His face changed. It was not surprise, more like recognition accompanied by something he did not intend to share. "Still running," he said. "You knew it would." "I hoped. How does it work?" He looked along the pipes, perhaps deciding how much explanation she had earned. The spring line comes down from the collection point uphill. Low-grade water, warm enough to be useful, not warm enough to cook anybody. Ruth ran it through a separate cellar loop and a heat exchanger. As long as the slope keeps feeding it and the return stays clear, it circulates without the electric pump. So why is the rest of the lodge frozen? Because this side and that side aren't the same water. He tapped the warm pipe, then the insulated tank. The thermal loop gives up heat here. The lodge loop takes that heat upstairs. Or it does when the circulator works. Mara looked at the green pump mounted beside the tank. Rust streaked its lower housing. That's the circulator? That's an artifact shaped like one. He put a screwdriver to the service port. The screw resisted, then came free with a rusty squeal. A few drops of black water escaped. Cal inserted the screwdriver and tried to turn something inside. Metal scraped. Rotors seized. "Can you fix it? Can I make it turn?" "Maybe." "Is that fixing it?" "No." "How long would it run?" "Could be an hour. Could be 3 weeks. Could lock up while you're asleep and cook its windings." Inez leaned against the stone wall. Cheerful as ever. "You want cheerful? Hire a magician. He'll wear a better shirt." Cal worked the rotor back and forth until it began to move more freely. He replaced the screw, wiped his hands on a rag, and pointed to a row of branch valves. Upstairs is divided into 4 zones, downstairs 3. Whoever winterized the place last closed 2 and left 5 open. Who winterized it? Ruth, most likely. 3 winters ago. Last time I was here was 2 years ago. She had me check the cellar loop. Wouldn't let me touch the lodge side. Why? Cal picked up his mug and discovered it was empty. Because I told her to close the building for good. The answer landed harder than Mara expected. "You thought it couldn't be saved? I thought Ruth couldn't keep saving it." "That's different." "Yes, what did she say?" "That I should confine my expertise to machinery." Inez snorted. That was the polite version. Cal ignored her. "We pressure test 1 zone at a time. Before that, we drain anything that hasn't already drained itself. If you send water through all 7 branches, you'll find every split at once. How many do you think there are?" "No idea. Best guess. Best guesses cost extra. Mara folded her arms. What does a new circulator cost? Cal named a figure that made her unfold them. That's installed? That's the pump. What does it cost installed? Depends how much of the old piping objects to being disturbed. She looked down at the stone floor. She had a little over $5,000 left in savings. Yesterday's fuel, Inez's plowing, food, and the estate filing expenses had already taken a bite. The taxes due in January would take a much larger one. Grant's voice returned with infuriating clarity. For about 6 weeks. What about a used pump? She asked. What about a used parachute? If the used parachute is all I can afford, I'm asking whether it opens. Cal considered her for a moment. You can free this one temporarily, he said. I'll show you. You'll monitor the motor temperature and keep the bad zones isolated. That buys you time, not reliability. How much time? You keep trying to turn uncertainty into a receipt. I like receipts. Receipts have numbers. Old buildings don't. He knelt beside the circulator and pointed out the isolation valves, the bleed screw, and the electrical disconnect. He made Mara repeat the order back to him. When she called the heat exchanger a tank, he corrected her. When she mixed up supply and return, he handed her a piece of chalk and told her to mark the flow direction on every accessible line. It felt less like help than an oral exam administered inside a damp cave. Still, when he switched on the circulator and the seized motor gave a low, unhappy hum, Mara held her breath. Cal touched the housing, listened through the handle of his screwdriver, then struck it once with the heel of his hand. The pump shuddered and began to turn. A vibration traveled through the lodge line. Mara smiled before she could stop herself. Don't fall in love, Cal said. It's dying. People said that about the whole building. Buildings don't care what people say. Pumps don't either. Do you? He looked at her over one shoulder. Occasionally, it passes. They opened only the first downstairs zone. Water moved into the line with a string of knocks. Mara and Cal followed it from the cellar to the service corridor, while Inez remained below, watching the pressure gauge Cal had clipped to the manifold. The first radiator stayed silent. At the second, air hissed from the bleed valve. Mara held a bowl underneath while Cal opened it with a key. Black water spat across her sleeve. You could have warned me. You were holding the bowl 6 inches too low. That's not a warning. You won't hold it low next time. The third radiator began to leak from its union. Mara closed the valve before Cal said anything. He gave a small nod. It was so slight she almost missed it. They marked the radiator with chalk and isolated it. In the dining room, the ceiling stain did not spread. The pressure dropped slowly, not catastrophically. Zone might be salvageable, Cal said. Might? See earlier comments regarding receipts. The second downstairs zone failed immediately. Water dripped inside the wall near the front desk, and the old plaster darkened in a vertical stripe. Mara shut it down, then cut a square opening with a utility knife while Cal watched. You're sure? He asked. About cutting the wall? About wanting to know. She pulled the plaster free. Behind it, a copper elbow had split wide enough to fit a thumbnail. Green corrosion crusted the joint. The stud beside it was damp, but solid. Mara stared at the damage. That's good, Cal said. She turned on him. In which language? You found it. It's accessible. Wood's not rotted. Bad would be hearing water and opening 6 feet of wall to locate it. This is your version of cheerful? No. This is my version of accurate. He showed her how to measure the pipe and left her with a short list of fittings, flux, abrasive cloth, and 2 alternatives if the hardware store did not carry the exact union. He did not offer to fetch them. Can you do the repair? Mara asked. Yes. She waited. Cal waited better. How much? He told her. Mara looked at the exposed pipe, then at his tool bag. How much to teach me? Inez, back from the cellar, smiled into her mug. Cal rubbed one thumb along his mustache. You know how to sweat copper. I watch Grandma. That means no. I can learn. That also means no. Will you teach me? If you listen. I listen. All young people say that while interrupting. I'm 25. That's young to a pipe. He agreed to return the next morning with a torch and enough scrap copper for practice. His hourly rate remained his hourly rate, he warned her. Teaching took longer than doing. That's okay, Mara said. It's your money. Yes. Cal's eyes held hers for an extra second, as if he recognized that the sentence meant more than payment. He packed most of his tools, but left the pressure gauge attached. Check it every 2 hours. If it drops below 12, shut the pump down. Touch the housing when you check. Warm is normal. Too hot to hold is off. Understand? Yes. If you smell burnt insulation, off. If it starts screaming, off. If you get impatient and decide to open another zone alone. Mara hesitated. Cal pointed a grimy finger at her. That hesitation is why Ruth had gray hair. After he left, Inez carried her mug to the service sink, remembered the water was off, and set it down unwashed. You knew he'd help, Mara said. I knew he'd come. Same thing. No. Inez pulled on her gloves. Cal comes because a machine might be hurt. Helping people happens to him by accident. At the door, she turned back. I'll clear the road Friday if you want. Mara calculated fuel, fittings, Cal's hours, and the dwindling number in her account. I can only promise this week, then I only promise Friday. After the plow disappeared, the silence returned, but it no longer felt quite as complete. Mara spent the afternoon marking flow arrows in chalk and checking the gauge. At 4, the pump housing was hot, but bearable. At 6, the pressure held at 14. She bled the first radiator again, this time holding the bowl high. Air escaped. Dark water followed. Then, so gradually she almost doubted it, warmth entered the iron. Mara sat on the floor beside it, one hand against the rusted ribs. The dining room remained cold. Most of the lodge remained unusable. A wall stood open. Room 6 still held a frozen towel, and the circulator beneath her feet was living on borrowed time. But the radiator was warm. Her phone buzzed with Grant's reply. Sorry, just saw this. Mom says you got it handled. Don't put too much money into that place. Mara read the message, placed the phone face down, and kept her hand on the iron until the heat reached her palm. The radiator stayed warm for 11 minutes. Then the pump gave a grinding cough beneath the floor, and the heat began to fade. Mara ran to the cellar. The pressure gauge still read 14, but the circulator housing was too hot to touch. She shut off the disconnect, closed the zone valve, and stood listening as the mechanical hum died away. Borrowed time, she said. The thermal line continued its quiet passage through the heat exchanger, indifferent to the failure beside it. Condensation shone on the old copper. The cellar remained warm while the lodge above surrendered again to cold. Mara checked the gauge at midnight and 2 in the morning, even though the pump was off. At 4, she stopped pretending she was going back to sleep and heated water for coffee. Cal's truck appeared just after 8. He came into the service kitchen carrying a small propane torch, a length of scrap copper, and 2 paper bags darkened with grease. Breakfast, he said. Mara opened one bag. It contained a sausage biscuit wrapped in foil. Inez told you to feed me? She told me your coffee was a human rights concern. My coffee was her coffee. Take it up with her. Cal had brought his own thermos. They practiced at one of the stainless steel tables. He made Mara clean the outside of the pipe and the inside of each fitting until both shone. She applied too much flux the first time. You painting a house? I'm making sure it's covered. Flux isn't frosting. She wiped some away. You know, a normal teacher might say how much before I use it. A normal student might watch the demonstration. I did watch. You watched my hands, then did what you wanted. Mara looked at him. Is this what working with Grandma was like? No. Ruth did what she wanted before I demonstrated. He showed her how to heat the fitting rather than melt solder directly in the flame. On Mara's first attempt, the solder balled and fell onto the steel table. Too cold, Cal said. It had fire on it. So does a birthday cake. On the second attempt, she scorched the flux black. Too hot. You're enjoying this. A little. Her third joint looked uneven but held when Cal capped the scrap and pressurized it with a hand pump. He raised one eyebrow. "That means it's good?" Mara asked. "That means it's not leaking yet. You'd make a terrible motivational speaker. I'm motivating you to check your work." They moved to the opened wall near the front desk. Cal shut and drained the second downstairs zone, then handed Mara the tubing cutter. She positioned it around the split elbow. "Straight," he said. "It is straight. It's optimistic." She adjusted it. "Better." The cutter made a faint rasp each time she turned it. Mara tightened the wheel gradually, the way he had shown her, until the damaged section came free. Black water spilled into the towel below. The smell pulled a memory loose. Ruth kneeling beneath the service sink with a wrench between her teeth, while Mara held a flashlight badly. "Light where I'm working," Ruth had said. "I am. Then I'm apparently working on your shoes." Mara realized she was smiling. Cal noticed, but did not ask why. He handed her abrasive cloth. The replacement took 3 attempts. Mara overheated the first fitting and had to clean it again. On the second, she shifted the pipe before the solder cooled. Cal cut the joint out without comment. "You can say it," she told him. "Say what?" "That I should have paid you to do it. You should have paid me to do it." She glared at him. "You asked." On the third attempt, she held still. The solder drew into the joint in a clean silver ring. Cal waited until it cooled, wiped it, and inspected the underside with a small mirror. Then he handed the mirror to her. "What am I looking for?" "Your work." She turned it until the repaired joint came into view. It was not pretty. A small silver drip had hardened along one side, but the ring was complete. "Now pressure test it," he said. They returned to the cellar. Mara connected the hand pump to the isolated branch, following Cal's instructions one step at a time. At 15 pounds, the needle held. She waited 30 seconds, then a minute. "It's holding, so far. Could you let one good thing remain good for 5 seconds?" Cal checked his watch. "Starting now." Mara watched him. He watched the gauge. After 5 seconds, he said, "There. Enjoyed it?" "Immensely." They opened the zone slowly. Water moved into the repaired line and continued toward the front rooms. No dark stripe appeared on the plaster. The gauge dipped, settled, and held. The circulator remained off. Cal knelt beside it and removed the electrical cover. The smell of overheated insulation lingered inside. "You're done borrowing," he said. "It ran 11 minutes. That was generous. Can it be rebuilt? Not for less than replacing it." Mara leaned against the cellar workbench. "I can't buy a pump today." "Then don't." "That's your advice?" "My advice is don't spend money you don't have because the building is making you feel desperate. Desperation buys the wrong parts. The storm doesn't care about my purchasing process. No, but the cellar loop will keep this level above freezing. Drain the upper system properly. Close rooms. Use electric heat in one downstairs space if the circuits will carry it. The lodge won't be comfortable. It can be safe for a few days." "How many?" Cal looked at the warm line, then at the thermometer. "As long as the thermal flow stays steady and you don't get clever. You use that word like an accusation. I've met clever." Upstairs, he helped her identify the lowest drain points, but he made her attach every hose and open every valve herself. Water ran dark, then clear, then slowed. In room 6, they removed the frozen towel and cut out the split section without repairing it. "Why leave it open?" Mara asked. "Because you're not heating this zone yet. Cap it, mark it, move on. It feels unfinished. It is unfinished. That's different from failed." The sentence stayed with her. By noon, the plumbing had stopped making dangerous sounds. The downstairs zone she had repaired remained full but cold. Everything else was drained or isolated. Cal helped her carry a portable electric heater from a storage closet, tested the cord, then rejected it because the insulation cracked when bent. "There's another one in the office," Mara said. "That orange thing with the burnt plug? You've been here half a day and already judged all my heaters." "I judge quickly. It saves daylight. He wrote the specifications for a safe unit and the correct circulator on the back of the hardware list. I can get the fittings and heater today, Mara said. Maybe price the pump. Price the pump twice. What does that mean? It means the first place will hear snow in your voice. Before he left, Mara paid him in cash. Watching the bills disappear into his worn wallet made her stomach clench. Cal counted them, removed 2 20s, and handed them back. You were here longer than that. I spent part of it eating. The biscuit took 4 minutes. I chew carefully. She did not reach for the money. I don't need charity, no. You need arithmetic. I told you my rate. That's the rate. She took the bills. Cal lifted his tool bag. Ruth used to make the same face. What face? Like accepting fairness was somehow weakness. Mara opened her mouth, but he was already climbing the cellar steps. The wagon started reluctantly. Mara let it idle while she scraped frost from the inside of the windshield. The valley road was narrow but passable where Inez had plowed, with high white banks on either side and dark spruce rising behind them. Cell service returned near the highway. 3 messages arrived at once. One was from Grant. You should seriously think about this before you burn through everything. One was an automated reminder about her phone bill. The third was from Denise. I'm finishing Ruth's clothes Saturday. Let me know what you want kept. Mara pulled into the hardware store parking lot and called her. Denise answered in a low voice. I'm with the agent. Then why did you text me? Because Saturday is coming whether the agent is here or not. Don't get rid of Grandma's clothes. I cannot keep an entire wardrobe indefinitely. She didn't have an entire wardrobe. She had 6 sweaters, 4 pairs of pants, and a bathrobe. Also coats, shoes, nightgowns, scarves. The red scarf is with me. Denise stopped. Mara looked at her reflection in the windshield. Freckles stood out across her pale face. Her dark auburn hair had been flattened on one side by the knit cap Cal made her wear while soldering. I wondered where that went, Denise said. She gave it to me in October. I know. The quiet admission softened something Mara had intended to keep hard. Please box the rest, she said. I'll come for it. When? I don't know. Mara, the photographer. Put the box in the garage. There are already boxes in the garage. There were also jumper cables and a battery pack in the garage. Now they're Grant's. Denise's voice cooled. Grant took the items assigned to him. He took the means for me to start the vehicle I was assigned. You chose the lodge. I did. Then why do you sound angry with me? Because Denise had turned Mara's choices into evidence against her while treating her own choices as weather. Because she could empty Ruth's room within 48 hours but needed endless patience for Grant. Because some unguarded part of Mara had expected her aunt to say, I packed you a sandwich, or are you warm enough, and hated itself for expecting it. I'm standing in a parking lot, Mara said. I need to buy pipe fittings. What happened? A line split. Already? Cold and Copper keep their own schedule. Denise inhaled. You can still come back before the storm. And sleep? Where? The sofa, temporarily. The sofa I slept on for 3 years? This doesn't have to become a competition about who did more for Mother. Mara watched a man push a cart of salt bags across the parking lot. One wheel wobbled violently, but he kept correcting its path instead of stopping. No, she said, it really doesn't. She ended the call. Inside the store, she priced the circulator twice as Cal instructed. The first clerk offered a premium model with digital controls she did not need. The second found the correct basic pump in a catalog and quoted $40 less, but it would not arrive until Monday. Mara ordered only the fittings, caps, a safe electric heater, and 2 rolls of pipe insulation. At the register, she removed a packet of work gloves from her cart, checked the total again, then put the gloves back. The cashier noticed the healing cut across her knuckles. You sure? No, Mara said, but ring them up. The lodge was darker when she returned, its roof line barely visible against the evening sky. She carried every box in herself, then spent an hour insulating the accessible cellar lines and sealing drafts around the bulkhead without blocking ventilation. She placed the electric heater in Ruth's old office off the dining room. The outlet held. Warm air stirred dust beneath the desk. The room began at 34 degrees. Mara hung her parka on the door, kept her charcoal sweater on, and ate another peanut butter dinner while sorting fittings on the floor. By 9, the thermometer read 41. She dragged the cot up from the cellar storeroom and unfolded it beside the desk. The office was cramped, dusty, and still too cold for comfort, but for the first time since arriving, she would sleep above ground. Before turning off the lamp, Mara wrote 3 words on the exposed plaster beside her repaired pipe. Held at 15. It was not pretty. It was not finished. It had held. The words were still visible when Mara woke. Held at 15. They looked cockier in daylight. The office had cooled to 38 degrees after the heater's safety switch shut it off during the night. Mara's breath showed above the cot. One brown boot had fallen onto its side, and Grandma Ruth's scarf had slipped from the desk chair to the floor. She picked it up quickly, as if Ruth might have seen. The outlet was warm, but not hot. The heater's intake grill had collected a thick mat of dust from beneath the desk, choking its airflow. Mara cleaned it with an old toothbrush, moved the unit farther from the wall, and switched it back on. The fan came alive. One crisis defeated by housekeeping, she said. Ruth would have approved. She considered cleaning a legitimate branch of engineering. Mara carried the hot plate to the service kitchen and heated snow for coffee. As it melted, she studied the exposed pipes above the utility sink. The cold water supply branched before it rose to the guest floors. If she kept the upstairs valves shut, she might be able to restore water only to the kitchen. Might had become the most expensive word she knew. She went to the cellar, traced the cold supply twice, then opened the kitchen branch a fraction. The pipe knocked. Mara froze with her hand on the valve. Nothing dripped. Nothing sprayed. She opened it another quarter turn and ran upstairs. The kitchen faucet coughed air, spat brown water into the sink, then produced a thin, steady stream. Mara let it run until it cleared. She put both hands under it. The water was painfully cold, but it came from a faucet instead of a saucepan full of roof snow. She washed her face, gasped, and laughed into the empty kitchen. The front door opened behind her. "You armed?" Inez called. "With plumbing. More dangerous than a gun in this building." Inez entered carrying a plastic crate and an expression that suggested she had already found 3 things to criticize from the driveway. "You're early," Mara said. "Snow's late. You said Friday. It is Friday." Mara looked toward the faded calendar, then remembered it was 4 years wrong. Inez set the crate on the work table. Inside were 2 dozen eggs, a loaf of wheat bread, a bag of coffee, onions, potatoes, and a paper sack stamped with the name of a butcher in town. "I can't pay for all that." "Good morning to you, too." "I'm serious. So am I. This isn't a gift." "What is it?" "Inventory." "For what?" Inez walked to the sink and turned on the faucet. Water ran. Her eyebrows rose. "Kitchen branch only," Mara said. "Upstairs is isolated. You test it?" "I watched the meter for 20 minutes and checked the cellar." "That's not what I asked. I pressure tested it at 10. "Better." Mara touched the crate. "Inventory for what?" "Del Warren's crew will be cutting deadfall off the East Utility Road tomorrow. 4 adults, possibly 5 if Eddie stops pretending his back is improving. They'll want breakfast. The lodge isn't open. The kitchen has water. The dining room has hypothermia. They wear coats for a living. I don't have the range." Inez pointed toward the old 8-burner stove. "Why not? It hasn't been used in years. Neither have half the men in the valley. They still show up." "I'm not feeding anyone from a stove I haven't checked." "Good. Check it." Mara stared at her. "Did you tell them I'd cook?" "I said there might be coffee and eggs. That's telling them I'll cook with extra words. You can say no." The answer was immediate and without pressure. Inez began removing groceries from the crate, placing each item where it had been stored years earlier. Mara watched her. "How much would they pay? For breakfast? For opening the kitchen before dawn, cooking, cleaning, and listening to 5 people explain snow to each other. Inez named an amount per person. That barely covers food. The food is priced into the crate. You pay me after. So I make. Not much. Compelling business model. You're not a restaurant yet. You're a warmish room on a useful road. Mara looked at the range. Ruth had started mornings there before the sky changed color. Mara could still picture her turning bacon with one hand while filling thermoses with the other. She had never hurried, but everything around her moved quickly. "The room isn't warmish," Mara said. "Open the cellar door. That's your heating plan." Warm air rises. It's been showing off for centuries. It was not enough to heat the dining room, but with the cellar door open and the electric heater moved safely into the service corridor, the kitchen temperature climbed 4 degrees by noon. Mara cleaned the range while Inez plowed the turn circle. Dust and old grease came off in gray ribbons. The burners were propane-fed, with the tank outside the rear wall. Mara checked the visible line with soapy water before attempting the valves. When Inez returned, Mara was crouched beside the range reading the manufacturer's plate. "You always this suspicious?" Inez asked. "I prefer breakfast without fire trucks. Nearest volunteer truck is 35 minutes away in good weather, so that's sensible." They lit one burner. The flame came up yellow, uneven, and too tall. Mara shut it off. "Blocked air shutter," Inez said. "You know stoves too?" "I cooked on this one for 19 years. You could have mentioned that before I spent an hour looking for the shutoff. You found it. You and Cal have the same deeply irritating educational philosophy. Ruth trained us." They removed the burner assembly and found a nest of dried grass around the air intake. No animal remained, only evidence of industrious trespassing. Mara cleaned it with a wire brush and vacuumed the cavity. The second attempt produced a steady blue flame. Then another burner lit. And another. The oven pilot refused. 3 burners are enough for eggs," Inez said. 3 working burners are enough for 12 broken burners if you ask Grandma. Now you're remembering correctly. Inez wrote the grocery costs on the back of an envelope. Mara added expected payment, propane use, and coffee. The profit was embarrassingly small. Still, it was the first money the lodge might earn instead of consume. "I'll do it," Mara said. Inez nodded once, as though Mara had agreed to shovel a walkway rather than reopen a piece of Ruth's life. 5:30, she said. "They'll come at 6. Tomorrow?" "That's generally what follows today." Mara folded the envelope and put it beneath the coffee tin. Inez left to finish the road. Half an hour later, another engine approached. Mara expected Cal. Instead, Denise's gray crossover stopped beside the wagon. Denise remained behind the wheel long enough to make the visit look accidental. Then she got out wearing leather ankle boots completely unsuited to the snow. She opened the rear hatch and lifted out a cardboard wardrobe box. Mara stepped onto the porch. "You drove all the way here in those shoes? Hello to you too. You're going to break an ankle." The road was clear. The road and your shoes are separate issues. Denise looked toward the plowed bank. "I passed Inez Bell. She brought groceries. For you, for breakfast." Denise's gaze shifted to the lodge. "You're having guests. Workers. Just breakfast. You've been here 3 days. 4. That doesn't make it better." Mara descended the steps and took one side of the box. Denise did not release it. "Where do you want this?" she asked. "Office. Is it heated?" More than it was. "That is not an answer. It's the answer I have." They carried the box through the service entrance. Denise stopped in the kitchen when she saw the clean range, the running faucet, and food on the work table. "You got the water back. To this room. And the heating?" "Waiting on a pump." "How much?" Mara told her. Denise set the box down too hard. The cardboard buckled at one corner. "You cannot spend that. It's not your money." "No, but I know what you have." Mara went still. "How?" "You told Mother last year when the water heater failed. She told me. I had more then." "That's exactly my point." Denise unzipped her coat, but did not take it off. Her eyes moved over the kitchen, lingering on the hook where Ruth's blue apron used to hang. "Mother poured everything into this place," she said. "Money, time, every ounce of attention she could spare, and most of what she couldn't. She made it work. She made herself work." The bitterness in Denise's voice was old enough to have lost its edges. Mara leaned against the table. "You hated the lodge. I hated calling home from college and being told she couldn't talk because 12 strangers wanted pancakes. She helped people, yes. She did." Denise brushed dust from one sleeve. Ruth liked being needed more than she liked being known. Needed people don't have to explain themselves. Mara thought of the hospital bed, the pill schedule, the bell ringing before dawn. She had spent 3 years being needed every hour. Without it, whole parts of her felt amputated. "You think I'm doing the same thing," she said. "I think you came here before you had anywhere else to go. You made sure of that." Denise's mouth tightened. "I handled it badly." The admission was so unexpected Mara almost missed it. "Badly? I should have given you more time." "More than 4 days?" "Yes." "How many?" Denise looked down. Again, no noun, no number. She reached into her coat pocket and placed Ruth's portable jump pack on the work table. "I took it out of Grant's garage," she said. "Did he know?" "He does now." A laugh escaped Mara. Denise nearly smiled, but the expression faded when she noticed Heg at 15, written beside the opened wall. "You did that repair? With Cal watching? Does it leak?" "No." "Yet? Are you two sharing material?" Denise walked closer, examining the soldered joint without touching it. "Mother taught me once. To solder? She tried. I burned a dish towel and she told everyone I'd attempted arson. That sounds like her. She told it at my wedding. That also sounds like her." For a moment they stood together in the cold office, both looking at a pipe Ruth would have had opinions about. Then Denise's phone rang. Grant's name appeared on the screen. Denise silenced it. "He thinks you're here to talk me out of staying," Mara said. "He thinks I'm here to make sure you don't ruin your share before he can persuade you to sell it." The honesty had teeth. "Is that what you think?" "I think a storm is coming Sunday night. I think your heat does not work. I think stubbornness feels very much like purpose when you're grieving." Mara held her gaze. "And I think concern feels very much like control, when nobody tells you no." Denise flinched. Neither apologized. At the service door, Denise pulled on her gloves. "The rest of Ruth's things can stay boxed in the garage until spring." "Thank you. I'm not promising the furniture." "I didn't ask you to." "No, you only ask after you've made not asking impossible." Denise stepped outside, then looked back. "Don't feed workers weak coffee. Ruth will haunt both of us." After her crossover disappeared, Mara opened the wardrobe box. Ruth's coat stood upright inside, compressed shoulder to shoulder. Her bathrobe lay folded at the bottom. Tucked along one side was the blue lodge apron, its pockets still dusted with flour. Mara carried it to the kitchen and hung it on its old hook. At 5 the next morning, headlights moved between the trees. The dining room was still cold, the pump still unaffordable, and the lodge was nowhere near open. Mara tied Ruth's apron over her charcoal sweater, lit 3 blue burners, and cracked the first egg into a hot skillet. The egg hit the skillet with a promising hiss, then the yolk broke. Mara stared at it. "You planning to apologize?" Inez asked from the doorway. "I'm deciding whether this one is mine. First one always belongs to the cook. That's law." Inez stamped snow from her boots and carried in a stack of thick diner mugs. Mara had found only 4 matching cups in the kitchen, and one had a hairline crack that leaked coffee down the handle. Where did those come from? My house. I'm not opening a restaurant with your dishes. You're feeding 5 people eggs. Don't get above yourself. Headlights swept across the dining room windows. Engines approached in a low procession, diesel sound rolling ahead of the trucks. Mara checked the clock. They're early. They work for the utility cooperative. Clocks are the one thing they believe they control. The dining room had reached 46 degrees. Mara had pushed 2 tables together near the service door and placed the electric heater where no wet boot could touch it. She set an old metal coffee urn at the table's end with a handwritten note taped to it. Hot. Mostly coffee. Inez read the note. Ruth wouldn't approve. Grandma once labeled a soup may contain elk. It did contain elk. It was lentil. The first man through the door was broad across the shoulders, with a silver beard and reflective stripes on his jacket. He removed his cap immediately, revealing hair flattened into an uneven white ring. Mara Hale, he said. Del Warren. You remember? You put ketchup on Grandma's biscuits. That allegation was never proven. The red bottle was in your hand. I could have been passing it. 3 more workers came in behind him. Priya Nand, who operated the crew's bucket truck, Mason Cole, an apprentice lineman well into his 30s, and Eddie Lark, who moved carefully but insisted to everyone that his back was merely expressing an opinion. A 5th worker, Theo Price, arrived last and blamed a frozen door latch for the delay. All of them looked around the lodge before they took seats, not casually. They examined it the way people studied a face after illness, searching for what had changed and what remained recognizable. Cold in here, Mason said. Priya elbowed him. That's why your coat came with sleeves. I'm observing. You've done enough for one morning. Mara cooked. 3 burners were just enough if she planned every movement. Eggs on one, potatoes and onions on another, sausage on the third. Toast went under the oven's broiler because the main oven pilot still refused to cooperate. The first batch burned while she was answering Dell's question about the road. Smoke rolled from the oven. Mara yanked out the tray. Ruth's back, Eddie announced. That woman could burn toast in a snowbank, Dell said. Inez leaned against the work table drinking coffee, offering neither defense nor assistance. You could have warned me, Mara said. You were holding the tray too low. That's Cal's line. It's a good line. Mara scraped the black toast into a bowl and started again. Her second batch browned unevenly but remained edible. She served eggs with broken yolks to anyone who had annoyed her, and intact ones to Priya, who had silently refilled the coffee urn. The crew ate wearing coats and knit caps. Steam rose from their mugs. Wet gloves rested on the radiator that was not warm. For several minutes, the only sounds were forks, chairs, and Eddie's occasional sigh each time he shifted his back. Then Dell said, "Potatoes need salt." Mara pointed to the shaker. "I meant during cooking. Your ketchup is by the coffee." He grinned. She had forgotten how hungry working people could make a room feel. They did not admire the place or congratulate her for trying. They ate, complained, asked for more toast, and argued about whether the East Road had drifted shut before or after midnight. It was ordinary. Mara had not known how much she missed ordinary. Priya carried her plate to the service window when she finished. "You opening rooms?" she asked. "Not yet." "When?" "When they have heat, water, and a reasonable chance of not soaking anyone in the night. High standards. I'm trying something new." Dell joined them, buttoning his jacket. "We've got line work on the north side next week. Closest motel adds 40 minutes each direction. The lodge won't be ready next week. How about 2 rooms? No? 1? Mara glanced toward the ceiling. Room 6 held a capped pipe. The other upstairs zones were drained. Ruth's office barely stayed warm with an electric heater. "No," she said again. "Breakfast, maybe. Beds, no." Dell studied her, then nodded. "Call when that changes." He paid the amount Inez had quoted, counting exact bills onto the counter. The others added their shares. Eddie left $3 beneath his mug. Mara picked it up and tried to hand it back. "That's for the toast," he said. The toast was included. That's for surviving the toast. He tucked the bills into the apron pocket and walked away before she could object. When the trucks pulled out, the dining room seemed larger and colder. 5 dirty plates sat in uneven stacks. The coffee urn was nearly empty. Mara took the envelope from beneath the tin and counted the money. After subtracting the groceries, propane, and Inez's mugs, she refused to accept payment for those. The profit would cover less than 1 hour of Cal's time. Still, the lodge had earned it. Mara wrote, "Breakfast, 5 beneath the grocery figures." Inez watched from the sink. "You told Del no. The rooms aren't safe." He respected that. He should. People around here are used to promises getting ahead of heat. Mara folded the money into the envelope. Grandma would have said yes. Probably. And then figured it out. Probably. Did that ever go badly? Inez turned off the faucet. Often. The bluntness surprised her. Inez dried her hands on Ruth's blue apron while Mara was still wearing it, realized what she had done, and wiped them on her own coveralls instead. Ruth once put 8 forestry workers upstairs during a cold snap with one functioning shower, she said. She told them hot water built character. One washed his hair in the kitchen sink. Mara smiled. She kept people warm, Inez continued. She also overpromised, undercharged, and worked until she couldn't straighten her hands. Don't turn every one of her mistakes into a sacred tradition. There it was again. Affection without worship. Mara had known Ruth as a grandmother, then as a patient. Inez and Cal had known her as a woman capable of being useful, funny, unfair, and impossible before Mara was old enough to notice the differences. Denise said Ruth liked being needed, Mara said. Inez's expression changed, but she did not dismiss it. Denise had a rough seat at that table. You agree with her? I agree Ruth was easier with strangers. Why? Strangers leave before you disappoint them. Mara looked down at the breakfast envelope. Inez lifted her coat from the hook. Storms moved faster. Snow starts late tonight. Wind by morning. How bad? Bad enough I won't clear this road again until it stops. You said Sunday. Storm didn't consult me. I need to get to town. Go now. For the pump. You buying it? Ordering it. With what? Mara gave her a look. Inez opened the door. There's that face again. What face? The Ruth face. Means the question landed. After she left, Mara washed dishes and scrubbed the skillet until the last burnt egg came loose. She kept expecting the breakfast to feel like a beginning. Instead, it felt like proof of how many beginnings required money. The correct circulator cost more than she had available after reserving funds for January's taxes. The lodge could survive without it for a few days, Cal had said. Survival, however, did not include bedrooms, showers, a dining room above 50 degrees, or income beyond 5 people eating in coats. Mara went upstairs and opened the door to room 1. It faced the lake. Frost feathered the lower half of the window, but the view remained. White shoreline, dark trees, mountain slopes fading into cloud. The bed frame was solid. The dresser drawers worked. A faded patch of wallpaper near the baseboard would need replacing. The radiator's valve turned when she tried it. 1 room. Del had asked for one. Mara closed the door. In the office, she removed a wooden jewelry box from the bottom of a carton. It contained Ruth's costume brooches, 2 pairs of Mara's cheap earrings, and a narrow gold bracelet. Mara had bought the bracelet for herself after the first year she worked full-time. She had stood at the jewelry counter for 40 minutes, embarrassed by the price even though it was her own money. Ruth had told her to buy something with no practical use once in a while, if only to prove practicality did not own her. Mara fastened it around her wrist. The gold looked absurd above her cut knuckles. She left for town. The jeweler weighed the bracelet twice, examined the clasp through a magnifier, and offered less than half what Mara had paid. That's the gold value, he said. Used jewelry doesn't hold retail. It isn't used. I wore it twice. He pushed it back across the glass. Then keep it. Outside, snow had begun to fall in dry, scattered grains. Mara sat in the wagon with the bracelet in her palm. Grant's message remained on her phone. Don't put too much money into that place. She could keep the bracelet. She could order a cheaper pump online and hope its fittings matched. She could wait through the storm, sleeping in the office while the lodge froze 1 empty room at a time. Or she could sell a beautiful, useless thing she had bought to prove she belonged to herself. Mara went back inside. At the supply counter across town, she paid the pump deposit with the jeweler's cash, the breakfast money, and 2 bills Cal had returned. The clerk promised delivery Monday if the highway reopened. If it doesn't? Mara asked. Tuesday. And if Tuesday doesn't? He looked out at the snow. Then Wednesday starts making promises. By the time she reached the valley road, wind pushed loose powder sideways across the pavement. She drove slowly, both hands tight on the wheel. Inez's plow marks were already softening at the edges. The lodge appeared through the snow with one dim office window glowing. Mara unloaded pipe insulation, batteries, canned food, and the remaining groceries. She filled every pot with water before shutting the kitchen branch again. Then she drained the exposed line, checked the thermal flow, and closed the cellar bulkhead against the wind. At the bottom of the steps, the thermometer read 54, 1 degree lower than the night before. Mara touched the warm copper. The flow still murmured, steady but quieter beneath the growing storm. Upstairs, the wind struck the lake-facing porch hard enough to rattle the front door. She carried the breakfast envelope to the office, opened it, and found Eddie's $3 still inside. For surviving the toast. Mara placed the bills beneath the hardware receipt instead of spending them. Then she pulled the cot away from the window, turned the heater to low, and listened as snow began closing the road behind her. By midnight, the wind had erased the porch. Snow packed against the lake-facing steps and climbed the lower rails. It struck the windows in dry handfuls, slid down the glass, and vanished into the dark. The office heater ran steadily, but each gust forced cold air through the old sash hard enough to stir the edge of Ruth's scarf. Mara rolled a towel and pressed it along the sill. The lights flickered. She stopped with both hands on the towel. The heater fan slowed, recovered, then slowed again. No, the lamp went dark. For a few seconds, the electric heater continued to tick as its metal housing cooled. Then the lodge held only the wind. Mara found the amber lantern and switched it on. The office seemed smaller inside its circle of light. Beyond it lay 11 guest rooms. The dining room, the service kitchen, and hallways full of drained pipes, all surrendering whatever warmth they had gathered. The cellar did not need electricity. She pulled on her forest green parka, wound Ruth's red scarf around her neck, and carried the lantern downstairs. Warm vapor touched her when she opened the cellar door. The thermometer read 53. The passive loop murmured through the heat exchanger. Mara placed her gloved palm on the copper line. It was no warmer than bath water, but after the office, it felt alive. She moved the cot back into the cellar storeroom. This time, it did not feel like defeat. The upstairs heating system had failed because a mechanical pump had stopped. The power had failed because the storm had taken something beyond her road. Yet warmth still entered through the rear stone wall from the wooded slope, moving without a motor, a switch, or Mara's permission. Ruth had not left her comfort. She had left her a margin. Mara slept in her clothes and woke whenever the wind changed pitch. At 3 a.m, she heard a heavy slide across the roof, followed by a muffled collapse outside. She ran upstairs, expecting to find part of the porch gone. A load of snow had fallen from the steep roof and buried the wagon to its windows. "Fine," Mara whispered. "I didn't want to go anywhere." At dawn, there was no dawn. The windows changed from black to gray, but the storm remained so dense that the lake disappeared. Snow had forced itself beneath the service door in a white ridge. Mara boiled water on the propane range and made coffee by lantern light. The kitchen temperature had fallen below freezing, but she had drained its exposed branch before bed. No new stains appeared on the walls. No pipes knocked. Her phone found a weak signal near the dining room window. 3 messages came through. Inez had written, "Power out valley-wide. Road closed. Stay put." Denise had written, "Please answer me." Grant's message was longer. "Mom says conditions are worse than you admit. This is getting ridiculous. I'll reimburse what you've spent and add $5,000 if you transfer the lodge to me. No hard feelings." Think about it. Mara read the offer twice. $5,000 would replace most of the savings Ruth's care had consumed. It would buy a deposit on an apartment, a reliable used car, perhaps several months in which no ceiling threatened to leak onto her. She could leave the cellar, let Grant discover the split lines, the failed circulator, the blocked oven pilot, the bad wiring, and the cost of keeping Inez's plow on the road. He would sell the lodge if he could, or board it up if he couldn't. Either outcome would no longer be Mara's problem. The wind struck the building. The service door shuddered. Mara thought about Grant eating Ruth's muffin and calling it dry. No hard feelings. She set the phone down without answering. By mid-morning, the cellar thermometer had fallen to 51. Not dangerous, but enough to make her check the loop every half hour. The warm supply line remained steady. The return was cooler, as it should be. The sound inside the copper had not changed. With no power for tools, Mara spent the day cleaning. She scrubbed the service kitchen by lantern light, hauled spoiled containers from the dead refrigerator, and cleared enough space in the pantry to see the shelves. The cold made the work slow. Her fingers stiffened whenever she took off her gloves, and grease resisted cold water like a matter of principle. She found no hidden instructions, no convenient envelope, nothing from Ruth explaining what to do. There were only ordinary remnants: an apron button, a bent can opener, salt fused into a shaker, a penciled note on a shelf that said, "More coffee, less cinnamon." The message irritated Mara because the cinnamon had been Ruth's fault. She was wiping down the range when her phone rang. "Denise." Mara answered. "I'm alive." "Why didn't you answer earlier?" "The signal comes and goes. Grant said he texted you." "He did." "What did he offer?" "You don't know." "I knew he intended to make an offer. I did not know the amount." Mara leaned against the work table. "He'll reimburse my expenses and add $5,000. Denise was silent. "What?" Mara asked. "That's low." The answer surprised a laugh out of her. "Thank you for the market analysis. I'm serious." "So is he. Grant believes the property will be easier to sell if he controls it. Grant believes everything is easier once someone else has done the unpleasant part." Denise did not defend him. Wind moaned in the vent above the range. "Do you have heat?" Denise asked. "In the cellar." "And upstairs?" "No power. You cannot spend the storm in a cellar. I have a cot. That does not improve the sentence. I'm dry. The building is holding. The thermal line is steady." "How do you know?" "I keep checking it. And if it stops, I'll drain what's left and use the propane range until the road opens." "The range is working?" "3 burners." Denise exhaled. Mother would call that sufficient. She'd call 2 burners extravagant. Another pause came, softer than the others. "I don't want you hurt to prove a point," Denise said. "I'm not here to prove one. Then why are you there?" Mara looked through the service window into the dark dining room. 5 adults had eaten breakfast there that morning, or perhaps it only felt like that morning. Time inside the storm had flattened. "I don't know yet," she said. It was the first honest answer she had given Denise in days. "Grant's offer is still low," Denise said. Then the signal failed. Power returned late in the afternoon with a snap that lit every switch Mara had forgotten to turn off. The service kitchen refrigerator hummed. The office lamp glowed down the hall. Somewhere upstairs, a radio alarm began shrieking inside an empty guest room. Mara climbed to room 8 and found it beneath a sheet beside the bed. The display blinked 12 o'clock while a local station broke through static. The announcer said the highway remained restricted and another 6 inches would fall before morning. The pump would not arrive Monday. Mara turned off the alarm and stood at the window. Snow softened the porch roof below. The lake remained invisible. She went back to the cellar and watched the thermometer rise from 51 to 52, though the thermal loop had no reason to know the power was back. Tuesday afternoon, a red plow blade appeared at the far end of the road. Inez's truck advanced slowly, throwing a wall of snow over the bank. She cleared the turn circle twice, then backed toward the service entrance with a large cardboard box strapped in the bed. Mara met her outside. "You found my pump." Your pump found my truck. Supply clerk called, said their delivery driver wasn't coming this far. I didn't ask you to pick it up. No, you would have waited until July out of politeness. I have to pay you. Yes. Inez named a delivery charge that was fair and not softened for grief. Mara paid it. Power held? Inez asked. Since Sunday afternoon. Thermal line? Cellar stayed above 51. Inez nodded toward the bulkhead. That system kept half this valley's boots thawed at one time. Grandma never told me much about it. Ruth didn't tell people how things worked unless she wanted them involved. Did she want you involved? She wanted everyone involved. She just wanted to remain in charge of the involving. They carried the box into the cellar. Cal arrived an hour later with snow in his mustache and no greeting beyond. You buy the right one? Mara showed him the label. He checked the flange spacing, voltage, and flow rating. Right one, he said. She waited. That's all? You want applause? I sold a gold bracelet for it. Cal looked from the pump to her bare wrist. You like the bracelet? Yes. Then you paid more than the receipt says. Mara swallowed. Can we install it? You can. I can watch. The old circulator resisted removal. One flange bolt rounded under Mara's wrench. Cal showed her how to seat a locking plier without crushing the fitting, but he made her apply the pressure. When the bolt finally turned, her shoulder struck the stone wall. She laughed breathlessly. Pain funny? Cal asked. Today, yes. They shut off the breaker, verified the circuit was dead, and photographed the old wiring before disconnecting it. Mara scraped the flange faces clean, fitted new gaskets, and lifted the pump into place. It was heavier at arm's length than it had been in the box. Hold it level, Cal said. I am. You're holding it emotionally level. What does that mean? Means your side's low. She adjusted it while he started one bolt, then took over and tightened the flanges evenly. Cal checked her work with 2 fingers and found one side too tight. Gasket'll pinch. Mara loosened it and began again. The wiring came last. Cal stood beside the breaker while she connected the leads exactly as photographed, secured the cover, and stepped back. Ready? He asked. No. Good answer. They opened the isolation valves. Mara bled air from the pump housing until dark water appeared. Cal watched the gauge while she opened the first repaired downstairs zone. 14 pounds, he said. Mara touched the switch. The new circulator began with such a quiet hum that she thought it had failed. Then water moved through the supply line. The pump housing warmed gradually, never becoming too hot to hold. Pressure settled. No water appeared beneath the flanges. They climbed to the dining room. The first radiator ticked. Air hissed through its bleed valve. Then water followed into Mara's bowl. Cal touched the iron. Give it time. Warmth entered the ribs from one end to the other. Not borrowed warmth. Not a heater pushing air through one office. The passive cellar loop was giving up its heat, and the new pump was carrying it where the old one no longer could. Mara stood with her hand on the radiator. Outside, Inez's plow widened the road. Inside, frost at the bottom of the nearest window softened into a clear line of water and began to run. The line of water reached the sill, gathered at the corner, and dropped onto the floor. Mara caught it with her sleeve. Cal watched her wipe the damp wood. You plan to stand there all winter? I'm enjoying my 5 seconds. You've had 7. The first downstairs zone held through the evening. The second developed a slow pressure loss that led them to a cracked valve behind the linen closet. Cal showed Mara how to pack the stem, then made her do it again when she used too much material and stiffened the valve. By midnight, both zones were circulating. The service corridor warmed first. The kitchen followed slowly, heat reaching it through the open doorway more than the single radiator near the pantry. The dining room stopped stealing feeling from Mara's fingers. Cal kept his coat on. How warm does it have to get before you admit it's working? Mara asked. It's working now. You could say that with more joy. I'm conserving joy. Winter's long. He left her with instructions to check pressure, pump temperature, and every repaired joint before bed. Mara did all three twice. At 1 in the morning, the dining room thermometer read 57. She slept in Ruth's office without the electric heater and woke because she was too warm beneath her coat. The next several days acquired a rhythm. Mara rose before dawn to inspect the cellar loop. She cooked breakfast whenever Inez sent a crew her way, never more than 6 people, and never anyone she could not fit near the warm radiator. Then she worked on the lodge until noon, drove into town, and cleaned rooms at a small highway motel until 5. The motel manager, a square-faced woman named Janine Cross, hired her after a 5-minute interview conducted beside a laundry cart. "You cleaned professionally?" Janine asked. "I cared for my grandmother for 3 years. That wasn't my question. No, but I've removed substances from carpet that should qualify me for federal work." Janine considered her. "Can you make a bed tight?" Mara made one. Janine bounced a quarter off the blanket, caught it, and said, "Tuesday through Saturday." The work paid little more than the breakfasts, but it paid regularly. Mara learned to fold towels into exact thirds, strip 6 rooms in an hour, and ignore the false intimacy of other people's discarded lives. She returned to the lodge after dark with her shoulders aching and spent another 2 hours on pipes. Cal pressure tested the first upstairs zone the following Thursday. Room 1 held. Room 2 did not. They found the leak beneath the radiator, where a union had cracked but remained hidden behind the baseboard. Mara removed the trim carefully, numbered each piece in pencil, and replaced the fitting herself. Room 3 held pressure but smelled damp once the radiator warmed. Mara opened the wall below the window and found darkened insulation. The timber behind it was solid, but meltwater had entered around the sash for years. She stood with a pry bar in one hand and wet insulation at her feet. "I had 3 rooms," she said. "You had 3 numbered doors," Cal replied. "I was counting this one." "Then count again." He showed her where the exterior flashing had failed, but did not offer to repair it. "Roof work in snow?" Mara asked. "Window work. From a ladder. In snow. You make everything sound delightful. I can hum while you fall if that helps." Room 3 was closed again. Mara taped plastic over the opened wall, shut its radiator valve, and moved her attention to rooms 1 and 2. She hauled mattresses downstairs, vacuumed mouse droppings, scrubbed frames, and washed every sheet twice to remove the stale smell. Ruth's linens did not match. Room 1 got white sheets, a green wool blanket, and 2 pillowcases embroidered with tiny blue flowers. Room 2 got cream sheets, a red plaid blanket, and curtains Mara shortened by hand because the hems had rotted. She did not make them charming. She made them clean. The upstairs hall bathroom took 4 evenings. Mara replaced the split sink trap, repaired a toilet fill valve, and carried 5 buckets of hot water upstairs to scour the tub. When she finally opened the bathroom supply, she waited beneath it in the dining room, watching the ceiling. Nothing appeared. She climbed back upstairs. The sink ran. The toilet filled. The shower coughed rusty water, then cleared. Mara stood in the spray wearing her charcoal sweater because she had not intended to test the shower with her whole body. The water was only warm. It was glorious. Del Warren booked rooms 1 and 2 for himself and Priya the following Monday. They would be working 3 early shifts on the North Line and wanted 2 nights. Mara named a rate. Del said, "That's too low. You complained about the potatoes. Those were undersalted." "Different department. It's what the rooms are worth." "Does it include breakfast?" "Yes. Still low. I'm not charging motel prices for a lodge with 9 closed rooms, then charge 2-room lodge prices." Mara refused to raise it. Del refused to pay less than an amount halfway between hers and the town motels. They settled the disagreement by pretending neither had yielded. Inez heard and said, "Ruth would have undercharged him." "I know. She'd also have put Priya in room 4, because it has the better morning light. Room 4 is frozen." Ruth was flexible about definitions. On the afternoon before the first overnight booking, Mara was sanding the top of a scarred bedside table when Grant arrived. His SUV stopped in the turn circle Inez had cleared that morning. He parked at an angle that would make plowing around him impossible. Mara watched through the upstairs window as he got out wearing polished boots and a wool coat too thin for the valley. He carried no hat. She considered not answering the door. Grant knocked 3 times, waited, then tried the handle. It was unlocked. "Mara?" he called. She descended the stairs with sanding dust in her hair and a respirator hanging around her neck. "You could wait to be invited?" He looked surprised. "You knew I was coming." "No. Mom said she told you. She told me you were asking about the tax statement. That's why I came. The tax statement is in my name." Grant wiped his boots once on the mat, then walked across the refinished section of floor with snow still packed into the treads. Mara looked at the wet prints. "What? Your boots?" He glanced behind him. "It's snow." "Thank you, Grant." "For what?" "I've been wondering." He returned to the mat and scraped his soles, not because she asked directly, but because her tone had made not doing it more uncomfortable. The dining room stopped him. Both restored downstairs zones were running. The room was not hot, but Grant unbuttoned his coat. "You fixed the heat." "Some of it." He touched the nearest radiator. "This is from that spring thing? The thermal loop transfers heat to the lodge loop. The new circulator moves it. How much did that cost?" "Why?" "Because I offered to reimburse you. You offered to own the lodge." Same conversation. "No." Grant walked through the service kitchen. His eyes moved over the working burners, the clean counters, the grocery crate, and the envelope where Mara recorded breakfast money. "You're feeding people now?" "Sometimes. Are you licensed for that?" The question was so perfectly Grant that Mara laughed. "What? You've never checked a license in your life. I'm trying to help you avoid trouble. You could have brought the jump pack. Mom handled it. Mom took it out of your garage." Grant opened his mouth, then closed it. He walked upstairs. Mara followed, resisting the urge to tell him not to touch anything. In room 1, he examined the mismatched pillowcases and the bedside table with half its finish removed. "This is what you're renting?" "When it's done." "It looks like Grandma's spare room. It was Grandma's guest room. You know what I mean?" "Yes, I usually do." He stepped into room 2 and ran one finger over the windowsill. No dust came away. "Who's staying here?" "2 utility workers." "How much?" Mara told him. His eyebrows rose. "Per person." "Per room." "That doesn't cover what you're putting in. It covers the room for 2 nights. You're thinking like an employee." The words landed where he intended. Grant leaned against the dresser, apparently unaware that he had chosen the only loose piece of furniture in the room. It shifted beneath him, and he straightened quickly. "You count the labor," he continued. "Repairs, cleaning, cooking, plowing, taxes. This place will eat you alive. It's interesting hearing you describe labor as valuable. What's that supposed to mean? You know?" "No, I don't." Mara looked at him. Grant's confusion was genuine, which was worse than defensiveness. "Grandma's care," she said. His face changed slightly. "Here we go." "Where?" "You acting like nobody else cared because you were the one living there." "I didn't say that. You don't have to. I was the one living there. And you got the benefit of that. The sofa, free housing." Mara gripped the sanding mask in her hand. Grant looked away first. He walked to the window and studied the frozen lake. "Mom thinks she handled that badly," he said. "She did. She was overwhelmed. So was I. Everybody was." The sentence was almost fair. That made Mara angrier than if he had lied. Grant turned from the window. "The townhouse has an offer. Once it closes, things settle down. I can give you $10,000 above expenses for this place. Why? Because you need cash. You want the lodge. I want to prevent you from losing everything. You mocked it. I mocked the condition. You said nobody truly wanted it. That was before you started pouring money into it." Mara stared at him. "That isn't better. It's realistic." "No, Grant, It's the family version of realistic. Wait until I do the work, then explain why the work proves I shouldn't own the result." His jaw tightened. 2 warm bedrooms don't make a business. I know. A few road workers don't make steady customers. I know. 1 big repair, and you're done. I know. He seemed unsettled by her refusal to argue with the facts. "Then sell while you can," he said. "No." "Why?" "Because I haven't decided this place failed." Grant put on his coat. "You're going to mistake stubbornness for destiny." That line sounds like Mom. She's not always wrong. "No," Mara said. "Neither am I." He left without slamming the door, which somehow felt more dismissive. His SUV threw slush against the snowbank as he turned around. Mara stood in room 1 among the mismatched furniture. 2 warm bedrooms did not make a business. Grant was right. Her phone rang. Dell's name appeared. "Please don't cancel," she answered. "Not canceling." "Priya says Mason's tired of the drive and wants the office cot if you can heat it. He'll pay. Also, Theo wants breakfasts, even though he's staying in town." Mara looked toward Ruth's small office. The cot was folded beside the desk. The wall repair still showed her penciled words beneath a clean patch of plaster. "I can do the office," she said, "but it's not a guest room. Mason slept in a bucket truck. That does not improve my standards. He'll bring his own sleeping bag." She named a reduced rate. Dell sighed. "You and I are going to fight about money all winter." After the call, Mara carried the sanding block back to room 1. Grant's wet footprints remained on the stairs. She cleaned them last. The clean stairs lasted until Dell arrived carrying a duffel bag with mud on the bottom. He noticed Mara looking at it. "I can leave this outside. You can wipe it." "That feels less dramatic." Priya came in behind him with a hard equipment case and a paper sack of oranges. Mason brought his sleeping bag, a pillow without a case, and enough snack food for a week. "I was told the office is rustic," he said. "The office is an office. I've slept in substations. That isn't the endorsement you think it is." Mara showed each of them the shut-off valves, the warm bathroom, and the doors that remained closed. She told them twice that the upstairs zone was newly repaired. "If you hear water, smell anything electrical, or wake up swimming, call me," she said. Dell set his duffel on the bed in room 1. "Where will you be?" "Cellar storeroom. You're giving us the warm rooms and sleeping underground? I'm giving you the rooms you paid for." "That wasn't my question. It was my answer." Priya opened the room 2 curtains. The frozen lake reflected late afternoon light into the room, turning the mismatched sheets pale gold. "This is nice," she said. Mara looked around, suspicious of the adjective. "The curtain hems are crooked. I wasn't planning to measure them. You might after dark. There's not much entertainment." Downstairs, Mason unrolled his sleeping bag beside the desk and studied the penciled words on the patched wall. "Held at 15, he read. "That's the pressure test." I thought it was a motivational statement. It can be both. The 3 workers left before dawn the next morning and returned after dark with snow on their shoulders and hunger strong enough to make them stand in the kitchen while Mara cooked. Dinner had not been part of the arrangement, but Dell offered to pay if she had enough. She made potato soup, sausage, and toast that did not burn. "That's disappointing," Eddie would have said, Dell remarked. "He can stay at the motel." He'd still come for breakfast. The second night, Mara carried her lantern down to the cellar at 10. The new circulator hummed evenly. Both downstairs zones and the first upstairs zone held 14 pounds. The thermal supply remained warm. She checked the pump housing. Warm, not hot. The lodge was doing what it had been built to do. At 1:30, Mara woke to the sound of rain. For several seconds, she lay on the storeroom cot, staring into darkness and trying to place the impossibility. Outside, the temperature was below 0. Snow pressed against the bulkhead. No rain could reach the cellar. Then a drop struck metal overhead. Another. Water ran down the stone wall beside the shelves. Mara was moving before she fully understood. She pulled on her boots without lacing them and ran upstairs. The dining room ceiling sagged above the newly warmed radiator. "Everybody up," she shouted. A seam in the plaster opened. Water came through in a clear sheet. Dell appeared at the top of the stairs in long underwear and one sock. Priya stepped from room 2, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. Mason emerged from the office carrying his boots. "Out of the upstairs rooms," Mara said. "Now." "We're out," Priya replied. Mara ran to the cellar. The pressure gauge had fallen below 8. The new pump was still turning, trying to circulate water the system no longer held. She killed the power, closed the upstairs zone, and opened its drain. Dell followed her down. "What do you need?" "Buckets, towels. Move the dining tables away from the ceiling." "Done." He did not ask where anything was. He went. Mara stayed at the manifold until the pressure stopped falling. The 2 downstairs zones held. The thermal loop continued moving through the separate side of the system, untouched. Above her, plaster hit the dining room floor with a wet crash. The split was behind the wall between rooms 1 and 2. By the time Mara found it, water had soaked the baseboard in room 2, run through the wall cavity, and spread across the ceiling below. The repaired union remained dry. 6 feet away, an old elbow had opened along a hairline crack Cal's pressure test had not revealed. Mara shut the radiator valves and cut away wet plaster while Priya held the lantern. "You don't have to help," Mara said. "I'm already awake. You paid to sleep. Then this is a refund issue." Downstairs, Dell and Mason shifted furniture, set out pots, and lifted the edge of the dining room rug before the water reached it. One section of refinished floor darkened anyway. The ceiling sagged farther. "Move," Mara called. They stepped back. A slab of plaster fell across the table where the utility crew had eaten breakfast. Gray water splashed the clean walls. The lodge went quiet after that, as if the damage had satisfied it. By 4, the leak had stopped. The upstairs pipes were drained again. Mara stood in the dining room with wet hair stuck to her face, staring at the wreckage. The ceiling opening exposed black lath and soaked insulation. Plaster covered the floor in heavy broken pieces. Water had run beneath the baseboard and into the repaired wall by Ruth's office. Held at 15 was still visible. Mason brought her a mug of coffee. "I'm sorry," Mara said. "For the coffee?" "For all of it." He tasted the mug. "Coffee's not helping. I'll refund the rooms." Dell, sweeping plaster into a pile, said, "No, you didn't get what you paid for. We got beds until 1:30. You got flooded out after 1:30. Priya sat on the bottom stair, pulling on her work socks. "Prorate it. I am not charging you by the dry hour." "That could be your business model," Mason said. "Adds urgency." Mara looked at their tired faces and hated that they were making jokes to protect her. "You can't stay another night," she said. "The zone is closed." "We're heading home after shift," Dell replied. "And the office?" "The office was dry. It's also part of the damaged wall." Dell set the broom against the table. "Then give Mason his office money back. Priya and I slept most of 2 nights. Keep ours." Mara wanted to refuse. She also needed the money for new pipe, insulation, plaster, and whatever waited beneath the darkened floor. She refunded Mason and half the other's payment. Dell argued. Mara became louder. In the end, Priya took the bills from Mara's hand and distributed them before the argument could turn stupid. At dawn, the crew left for work wearing yesterday's clothes beneath their insulated gear. Priya paused at the door. "Call when room 2 is ready. You want to come back? It has a good view. The wall is open, so call later." Their trucks disappeared down the road. Mara returned to the dining room. She removed the wet insulation first. Then she carried broken plaster outside in a galvanized tub, 1 load at a time. By noon, her arms trembled. The exposed lath dripped steadily into buckets. Cal arrived without being called. "Inez told you," Mara said. "Inez tells weather. She announces people." He inspected the split elbow and the dry repaired union. He tested the surrounding pipe with a small pick, then shook his head. Freeze weakened it. Pressure test didn't open it. Heat cycle did. "I missed it." "So did I. You're supposed to be the fossil. Fossils crack, too." He traced the line toward room 1. This run should be replaced, not patched. Too many old joints inside the wall. How much? He told her the materials cost. Mara looked down through the open floor cavity to the ruined dining room ceiling. And the floor? Needs to dry before you know. The plaster? You can patch it. That's not what I asked. Cal set his pick back in his bag. You keep asking for one number that tells you whether to stay, because numbers are useful, only after you decide what they mean. She laughed bitterly. Did Grandma pay you to speak in riddles? Ruth didn't pay me enough to speak at all. Cal removed his cap and wiped his forehead. Don't turn the upstairs back on until the whole run is replaced. Downstairs is safe. Safe until what? Until something changes. Excellent. He did not scold her for the sarcasm. He left 2 air movers and told her she could pay the rental after the floor dried. That kindness nearly undid her. Mara worked her motel shift that afternoon because not going would cost money she no longer had. She stripped beds, scrubbed shower drains, and remade rooms for strangers, while her own rooms stood open to their studs. Janine noticed the gray plaster in Mara's hair. You living in the place you're renovating? She asked. Yes, that's either efficient or terrible. Today it's terrible. Janine handed her a clean towel from the laundry cart. Clock out 10 minutes early. You look haunted, and guests complain when housekeeping looks haunted. When Mara returned to the lodge, Inez's truck was parked beside the porch. Inez had stacked the fallen plaster into neater piles. She was not cleaning, exactly. She was making the disaster easier to see. Don't, Mara said. Inez straightened. Don't what? Turn this into another thing the valley carries for Ruth. I moved plaster 6 feet. You brought the crew. You bring groceries. Cal gives me equipment before I can pay. Everybody keeps acting like if they help enough, this place becomes what it was. Inez took off one glove finger by finger. You think I brought Dell because I felt sorry for you? I think you all loved Grandma. I did love her. I also wanted to strangle her twice a week. Mara looked away. Inez continued. I brought paying customers because the valley needs a warm stop. I charged you for food. I charged you for plowing. Cal charged you his rate. Dell fought to pay more. That is not pity. The rooms flooded. One pipe failed. It destroyed 2 weeks of work. Then be angry at the pipe. I'm tired of being angry at objects. Then be angry at Grant. He looks sturdy. Despite herself, Mara laughed. It broke in the middle and became something dangerously close to crying. Inez did not hug her. She picked up one piece of plaster and placed it in the tub. Another storm's building Thursday, she said. 3 days, maybe 4. Utility Cooperative is already staging crews. I have no rooms. You have a dining room with a hole in the ceiling. Strong sales pitch. You have 2 heated downstairs zones, a working kitchen, a warm cellar that doesn't depend on power, and a road I can keep open until the wind gets bad. Mara wiped her face with the motel towel. What are you asking? I'm asking whether people can come here if the highway closes. This is not a shelter. No, it's a warm stop on a bad road. Grant's offer waited unanswered on Mara's phone. Reimbursement plus $10,000 now if his visit had been sincere. Enough to walk away before another pipe opened. Above her, water dripped through the ceiling into a metal pot. Below, the thermal line moved steadily through stone. How many people? Mara asked. Inez pulled her glove back on. That depends on the storm. 8, Mara said. Inez looked at the damaged ceiling, then back at her. 8. What? People. Maximum. No upstairs rooms. Nobody goes beyond the rope at the stairs. They bring sleeping bags, food if they have it, and whatever medications they need. I'm not promising beds. You planning to frisk them? I'm planning to be clear. Good. And if the downstairs pressure drops, everybody moves to the cellar. Inez nodded. Better. Mara wrote the rules on a sheet of cardboard and propped it beside the service entrance. Then she called Janine and asked to give up her motel shifts through the storm. Are you opening the lodge? Janine asked. For emergency stops. Paid, if people can. That answers how businesses become hobbies. I know. Janine was quiet long enough for Mara to picture the motel laundry room, carts lined beneath fluorescent lights. My Tuesday is already covered, Janine said. Call me when the road opens. If you're alive, you still have a job. Mara spent the next day making the lodge less dangerous. She cut away loose plaster from the dining room ceiling, screwed plywood beneath the wettest section, and hung plastic to direct any remaining drips into a galvanized tub. She moved the tables away from the damage and marked the soft floorboards with red tape. Cal inspected her bracing, added 2 screws, and said, "Acceptable. That's practically a parade from you. You want balloons tied to wet lath?" He helped her isolate the entire upstairs circuit at the manifold, then checked both downstairs zones. Afterward, he pointed at the thermal supply thermometer. Flows lower. Mara touched the copper. It's still warm. Still isn't a measurement. It was 52 this morning, 49 now. Because it's colder outside, spring temperature doesn't care much about weather. Flow does. Ice can choke the collection screen or the return channel. Where's the collection point? Uphill, about 200 yards. Follow the line markers. I didn't see markers. Orange paint on 3 trees. Faded to brown. Knowing Ruth. Can we check it now? Cal glanced through the cellar door. Snow had begun again, fine and fast. You can. But if you open anything and can't reseat it before dark, you lose the loop completely. Watch the temperature. Watch the supply return difference. If the flow keeps dropping, then go. You're leaving. I have 2 no-heat calls and a wife who thinks marriage includes arriving home before storms. Mara wanted him to stay. She disliked herself for wanting it. Tell me what I need. Cal described the collection box, a stone-lined spring basin beneath a hinged insulated lid, protected by a coarse screen where the warm water entered the closed exchanger line. The water did not circulate loose through the lodge pipes. It fed the separate thermal side and returned downhill through its own channel. Ice or branches could reduce the intake without stopping it completely. Don't force the valve, he said. Don't drop tools in the basin. Don't stand downhill from the overflow if you open it. Anything else? Don't go alone in whiteout. That was 4 things. I'm adding rules because you collect emergencies. By Thursday afternoon, the valley had disappeared behind snow. Inez kept the road open until 4. The utility crew arrived first. Del, Priya, Mason, Theo, and Eddie, who claimed his back had improved enough to sleep on a floor provided the floor understood boundaries. They brought sleeping bags, 2 camp pads, cases of bottled water, and a box of canned soup. You robbed a sporting goods store? Mara asked. Cooperative emergency cache, Del said. The sleeping bags are clean. The soup is legally soup. A nurse named Joanne Carver arrived next, her compact car tucked behind Inez's plow. She was in her 60s, worked between 2 valley clinics, and remembered Ruth's lodge well enough to ask whether the pantry door still stuck in damp weather. It does, Mara said. Good. I hate too much change. The last 2 were a highway maintenance driver named Russ Keene and his dispatcher, Alma Soto, whose truck had developed an electrical problem before they could return to town. 8. Inez parked her plow facing the road and came inside. You make 9, Mara said. I'm working. You're eating. I brought the food. That makes 9 with groceries. Inez removed her gloves. Your math has improved. Mara assigned space without apology. Joanne took Ruth's office because she had a 6 o'clock clinic call if the cell tower held. Eddie got the dining room bench with the firmest back. Everyone else spread sleeping bags along the inner walls of the dining room and service corridor, clear of radiators and the damaged ceiling. Nobody went upstairs. Nobody complained about the lack of beds. Mara served potato soup stretched with beans, onions, and the remaining sausage. The propane burners heated the kitchen, while wet coats steamed on hooks. Del and Priya argued over road closures. Alma tried to teach Mason a card game and accused him of cheating before he understood the rules. Joanne repaired a torn coat pocket with black thread from Ruth's sewing tin. The lodge did not look restored. It looked used. At 9, the wind strengthened. Snow rattled against the windows. Inez went outside twice to clear the service door and came back with ice in her braid. At 10:30, the lights failed. The new circulator stopped. Conversation died with it. Mara switched on the amber lantern and set it on the work table. Everybody stays where they are. "We know how power outages work," Russ said. "Then you know not to wander through an unfamiliar building in the dark." "Yes, ma'am." The ma'am irritated her, but he stayed seated. Mara went to the cellar. Dell followed to the top of the steps, but did not descend until she told him he could. The downstairs gauge remained at 14. Pressure was not the problem. Without electricity, the pump could not move the warmed lodge water through the radiators. The cellar thermometer read 47. Mara touched the thermal supply. Cooler. The return line held almost the same temperature, which meant the flow had slowed enough that little new heat was arriving from uphill. "How long?" Dell asked. "I don't know. Best guess." "I hate best guesses. Cal teach you that? He charges for it." Mara held the lantern close to the sight glass. Movement remained, but barely. "If the thermal loop stops, the cellar will still stay above freezing for a while," she said. "Stone holds heat. We can move everyone down here if the dining room drops too far. And the pipes? Downstairs, zones are full. If the temperature keeps falling, I drain them." "What fixes the thermal flow?" "Clearing the collection point." "Where?" "Uphill." Dell looked toward the bulkhead as wind pushed snow against it. "No." Mara turned. "No what?" "No going uphill in this. I'm not going now." "Good. I'm checking again in 30 minutes. 30 minutes later, the thermometer read 45. The wind eased slightly, no longer roaring continuously, but striking in uneven gusts. Snow still fell, though Mara could see the dark outline of the nearest spruce from the service door. Inez stood beside her, studying the woods. "There's a bench halfway up," she said. "Old logging cut. If you lose the markers, turn downhill. Don't keep climbing. You've been to the spring? Years ago. Come with me. I can't leave the plow if the road crew calls. It's the only vehicle positioned to move." Dell pulled on his coat. "I'll go." Mara almost said yes. Then she looked at the dining room. 8 adults were warm enough because the downstairs zones had carried heat for hours. If the power returned, someone needed to restart the circulator correctly. If it did not, someone needed to move people and drain the system. "You stay here," she said. "You know the manifold now. I watched you once." "So did I, the first time." "That is not reassuring." She showed him the 2 downstairs valves, the drain hose, and the pump disconnect. She made him repeat the order back. Inez found Ruth's old wooden snowshoes in the mudroom. One binding had been repaired with electrical tape. "Of course," Mara said. Ruth trusted tape more than some relatives. Mara put on her forest green parka, insulated boots, heavy gloves, and red scarf. She tucked a flashlight inside her coat, tied the amber lantern to her pack, and carried a short shovel and Cal's screwdriver. At the tree line, snow reached above her knees, even with the snowshoes. The thermal line entered the lodge through the rear stone wall from that slope, but underground it left no visible path. She found the first orange mark on a spruce only because ice had protected a crescent of paint beneath the bark. The second marker had faded nearly brown. The third was buried behind a fallen fir limb. Mara climbed past it, counting steps. The lodge lights did not glow below. With the power out and snow between the trees, the building vanished. For one terrible minute, so did the next marker. She stopped. Ruth's voice came back with unwanted clarity. "Lost people walk faster, because fear hates standing still." Mara stood still. Wind moved powder through the branches. To her left, she heard water, not flowing freely, a muffled, irregular trickle beneath ice. She followed the sound to a low mound of stone and timber. Snow buried the insulated lid. Mara cleared it with the shovel, found the iron ring, and pulled. The lid rose 3 inches, then caught. A fir branch had wedged beneath one hinge. She dug around it, broke smaller limbs away by hand, and lifted again. Warm vapor touched her face. Inside, The shallow collection basin was not frozen, but ice had formed along the overflow and back debris against the coarse intake screen. Needles, bark, and pieces of the fallen limb blocked most of its surface. Mara knelt in the snow. She cleared the screen with her gloved fingers, one handful at a time. The last clump resisted, frozen around the metal. She worked Cal's screwdriver beneath it and pried gently. The debris came free. Water moved through the screen with a sudden low rush. Mara laughed once, breathlessly, then checked the fitted cover and return channel exactly as Cal had described. She broke ice away from the overflow, reset the insulated lid, and packed snow around its edges. Nothing glowed. No hidden system announced success. There was only water moving where water should move. When Mara reached the lodge, Del pulled open the service door before she could knock. "You were gone 43 minutes, he said. "You counted?" "Cal charges for estimates." In the cellar, the supply pipe was warmer. The thermometer had risen 1 degree, then another. Mara stood with snow melting from her parka onto the stone floor while 9 adults waited above in lantern light. Inez touched the copper line, then looked at her. "Ruth would've?" "I know," Mara said softly. She unwound the red scarf from her face. "But I did it." The power returned at 2:17 in the morning. Every light came on at once. The refrigerator started, the office lamp glowed, and the radio alarm in room 8 resumed, screaming to an empty bed. Mara went straight to the cellar. She bled air from the new circulator, checked the gauge, then opened the downstairs zones one at a time. Del stood beside her holding the flashlight even though the electric lights worked. "You can go upstairs," she said. "I've become invested. That's how buildings trap you." The pump started quietly. Warm water moved through the lodge loop, carrying heat from the restored thermal flow toward the dining room. The cellar thermometer reached 51. Mara touched the supply pipe, then the return. The difference between them widened as fresh heat entered the exchanger. "It's working," Del said. Mara listened to the pump. "It's working now." He smiled. "Cal really got to you." Upstairs, the radiators began ticking. The 9 adults applauded when the first one warmed, not loudly or ceremonially, but with the tired sarcasm of people who had been awake too long and needed something to blame for their relief. Mara took off her wet parka. Her sweater sleeves were soaked to the elbows. Snow had melted through her work pants, and the repaired snowshoe binding had rubbed one ankle raw. Joanne looked up from the office doorway. "You're bleeding." "I'm melting." "Sit." "I need to check the kitchen line." "Sit first." "Plumbing second." Mara almost argued. Joanne raised the black sewing needle she had used on the coat pocket. "I can make this medical or decorative," she said. Mara sat. Joanne cleaned the scrape while Inez reheated soup. Mason and Theo moved sleeping bags closer to the radiators. Alma dealt cards on the dining table beneath the plywood ceiling patch. Russ fell asleep sitting upright with his chin on his chest. Nothing about the room resembled a successful lodge. Wet gloves hung from chairbacks. Plaster dust remained in the floor seams. The air smelled of soup, wool, and 10 adults who had spent too long in winter clothing, yet the lodge held them. Mara ate half a bowl before falling asleep on the bench beside Eddie. When she woke, someone had placed Ruth's red scarf over her shoulders. The storm stayed for 2 more days. Inez cleared the turn circle whenever the wind allowed but did not attempt the valley road. Del's crew monitored outages by radio. Joanne handled clinic calls from Ruth's office, directing patients to open facilities without turning the lodge into anything more than it was. Alma coordinated with highway crews from the service kitchen because the dining room had the loudest arguments. Mara cooked, cleaned, checked the cellar, and kept count. Water, propane, coffee, pressure, temperature. She assigned dishwashing after the second meal and stopped people from pouring grease down Ruth's sink. She charged phones in shifts when the power held. When it failed again for 4 hours, she moved everyone closer to the open cellar door and let passive warmth rise through the service corridor. Nobody became comfortable. Nobody became unsafe. On the 3rd morning, the snow stopped. The sky cleared so abruptly that sunlight struck the frozen lake like a sheet of white metal. Inez started the plow before breakfast and opened the road in slow sections, returning every hour with new ice on her braid. The first person able to leave was Joanne. She placed cash beside the coffee tin. Mara picked it up. "You didn't have a room. I had an office, 2 meals, and heat. The office was already assigned to Mason. Mason slept in the pantry doorway. I was guarding the snacks," he said. Joanne put her gloves on. "Charge me for the chair, then." Mara tried to return half. Joanne accepted only after Mara wrote a receipt. Russ and Alma paid next. Dell's crew insisted on paying for meals, though Mara refused any lodging charge because most of them had slept on the floor. Eddie left another $3. "What did I burn this time?" Mara asked. "Nothing. I'm investing in future mistakes." The money did not approach the cost of the pump or the ruined ceiling. It covered food, propane, and part of Inez's plowing. It made the storm sustainable instead of charitable. That mattered. After the last truck left, silence settled over the dining room. Mara stood among empty mugs and folded sleeping bags, too tired to begin cleaning. Inez carried the grocery crate to the service door. "You should sleep. You should stop giving obvious advice. You should get better at taking it." Mara looked at the table where Alma's unfinished card game remained arranged in crooked rows. Did Grandma do this often? Not with cardboard rules. You know what I mean. Inez leaned against the door. Ruth opened the lodge during storms. Sometimes she charged. Sometimes she forgot. Sometimes she fed 30 people and complained when they tried to wash plates. Did it work? For them. That's not what I asked. I know. Inez rubbed one hand over the back of her neck. It worked until Ruth became the only piece of the system she didn't maintain. Mara thought of the hospital bed, the nightly bell, and Ruth apologizing whenever Mara helped her stand. "I slept while everyone was here," Mara said, "for nearly 40 minutes. A triumph. I let people wash dishes. Historic. I charged Joanne for a chair. That one would have killed Ruth." Mara smiled. Inez opened the door. "Build something that can survive you taking a nap." The advice remained after she left. Mara closed the lodge for 4 days. She went to her motel shifts, slept in the office, and worked only on repairs that prevented further damage. She did not serve breakfast. She did not answer Dell's first question about rooms until she had an answer she trusted. Cal helped her plan the replacement run between rooms 1 and 2. He measured. Mara checked his measurements. He looked offended, then told her to check again because the first number was wrong. They removed every weakened elbow in the wall. Mara cut, cleaned, fitted, and soldered the new copper. Cal inspected each joint with his mirror. Twice he made her redo one that probably would have held. "Probably costs less now than later," he said. "I'm starting to dislike accuracy. It survives." When the line held pressure, they left it cold overnight. Mara checked it at midnight and before dawn. 14 pounds both times. The next morning she opened the zone and watched from the dining room. No water appeared. Room 1 warmed. Room 2 warmed. The new pipe expanded with a gentle series of clicks behind the open wall. Mara did not close the plaster immediately. She watched the joints through 3 full heat cycles. Cal approved. "That sounded almost joyful," she said. "I'm running low. Don't waste it." Mara rehung insulation, replaced lath, and patched the dining room ceiling in sections. Her first plaster coat sagged. The second cracked. The third held well enough that she stopped chasing perfection. The darkened floorboards dried without warping, though their finish needed sanding again. She sanded them. Breakfast returned the following Monday. 4 utility workers became 6, then 3, then none for 2 days. Joanne began stopping once a week between clinics for coffee and eggs. She paid exact change and corrected Mara's posture whenever she carried heavy pans. Mara raised the room rates. Dell complained that she had listened to him and demanded a discount for strategic consulting. She added $2 to his breakfast. Room 3 remained closed. Mara repaired the failed window flashing from a ladder, while Inez stood below and insulted her balance. Once the wall dried, Mara replaced the insulation herself, but she refused to reopen the room until 2 more storms passed without moisture. The lodge began to make modest money. It also spent money constantly. A refrigerator seal failed. The propane regulator needed replacement. Inez's plowing invoice arrived every Friday, whether the guest rooms were occupied or not. January's tax payment took almost everything Mara had accumulated. She paid it. Some nights, the figures in the envelope still ended in red. Other nights, breakfasts and rooms covered more than they cost. Mara kept separate columns for labor, even when she could not pay herself. Grant had been right that ignoring her own work would create a lie. She stopped confusing a difficult business with a failed one. The second large storm brought no crisis. The thermal screen remained clear. The new circulator held. Mara sheltered 6 adults overnight, all of them paying customers who understood they were buying warmth, food, and a safe road stop, not luxury. By then, the dining room ceiling was whole again. The tables did not match. The chairs never had. Clean towels warmed beside the service radiator. On the kitchen wall, Mara hung a chalkboard listing breakfast hours, road conditions, and which rooms were closed. Nothing on it promised more than she could provide. Denise called on a bright afternoon while Mara was changing the sheets in room 2. "I heard you were open," she said. "Partly. Grant says you're advertising rooms." "I'm not advertising. People call. That is how business worked before advertising. Grant seems newly interested in business history." Denise did not laugh. "The townhouse sale closes Friday," she said. Mara tucked the sheet beneath the mattress. "Congratulations." That sounded sincere. It was mostly sincere. "I have more of Mother's kitchen things. The mixer, 2 cast iron pans, her big enamel stock pot. I wondered where that went. I packed it before the photographer came. For you? For the house?" Mara smoothed a wrinkle from the blanket. "Okay." Denise exhaled. "They belong at the lodge." The sentence was not an apology, but it carried effort. "I can pick them up next time I'm in town," Mara said. "We can bring them." "We?" "Grant has the truck." "Of course he did." Mara looked out the room 2 window. Inez's plow had left clean banks along the road. 2 utility trucks stood in the turn circle. Downstairs, voices moved through the dining room, followed by the clatter of someone placing a mug in the wrong bus tub. "When?" Mara asked. "Tomorrow." They arrived during breakfast. Grant carried the enamel stock pot through the service entrance as if delivering a ceremonial object. Denise followed with the mixer and pans. The dining room held 7 winter workers, Joanne and Inez, coats dried beside warm radiators. The repaired ceiling showed a slight color difference, but no stain. Coffee moved from hand to hand. Mara stood at the range in Ruth's blue apron, turning potatoes. Grant stopped. His eyes traveled from the full tables to the chalkboard, then toward the stairs where clean towels waited in labeled baskets. Denise looked at Mara, not at the lodge, at Mara. For a moment, her face held something close to grief and pride, each one preventing the other from speaking. Then Grant set down the stock pot. "Well," he said, "this changes the conversation." Mara turned off the burner. "No," she said. "It changes who thinks they're entitled to have it." Grant looked around the service kitchen as though expecting someone to challenge her on his behalf. Nobody did. Del lifted his coffee and said to Priya, "I believe that's our cue to become fascinated by breakfast." They carried their plates into the dining room. Joanne followed, taking Inez by the sleeve. Inez resisted just long enough to make clear that leaving was an act of restraint. When the service door swung shut, Mara removed Ruth's blue apron and laid it on the work table. Grant unbuttoned his coat. "I'm not claiming entitlement," he said. "You said this changes the conversation. It does." "What conversation?" "The one where we decide what makes sense." "We decided. You took the accounts and vehicles. Aunt Denise took the townhouse. I took the lodge. At the time, nobody knew you could get it running. I knew it might be possible. You hoped. So did you. You hoped it would fail. Grant glanced at Denise. That's not fair. Denise set the cast iron pans beside the stock pot. It's accurate. He turned toward her. Whose side are you on? The question sounded younger than he was. Denise took off her gloves one finger at a time. That is exactly the problem. Grant laughed without humor. Okay, so we're doing this. No one asked you to do anything, Mara said. You brought cookware. I brought back family property. You carried a pot from your truck. His mouth tightened. Mara almost enjoyed the anger. Almost. Then she noticed that Grant was looking through the service window at the dining room, where winter workers sat beneath the repaired ceiling. The expression on his face was not greed alone. It was exclusion. For once he had entered a family place and discovered that the shared history inside it did not center him. I didn't know Grandma still had people out here, he said. They didn't stop existing when you stopped visiting. I came when I could. You came when the roads were dry. I have a job. So did I. You were living with her because she needed care and because you needed somewhere to live. The old wound opened so cleanly Mara felt no surprise, only heat. Denise closed her eyes. Grant. What? We're pretending that wasn't part of it? Mara placed both palms on the steel table. I had an apartment before Grandma fell, a shared apartment. Yes, those are legal. You moved in with her. After she left a pan burning and fell trying to reach the smoke alarm. You never told me that. I called you. You sent $200 for Grandma stuff. Grant looked away. The kitchen burners hissed softly behind them. One of the pans clicked as it cooled. Mara continued before he could retreat into outrage. You don't get to erase what I did because admitting it makes you uncomfortable. And you don't get to turn what I've done here into a family opportunity. I offered to pay you. You offered $5,000 because you thought I was desperate. Then 10. After you saw 2 warm rooms. It was a negotiation. No, it was you waiting for my work to tell you what the lodge was worth. Grant's gaze returned to the dining room. You think 7 people eating eggs makes this place valuable? I think you drove 2 hours because somebody told you it was. He said nothing. Denise looked at Mara. How much is it making? Enough to cover food, heat, some repairs, and plowing. Not enough to pay me regularly. Then Grant has a point about sustainability. Of course he has a point. Having a point doesn't make him an owner. Mara opened the envelope beneath the coffee tin and placed it on the table. Inside were grocery receipts, room payments, Cal's invoices, Inez's weekly plowing charges, and the tax receipt. This is what the lodge is, she said. Not the tables full of people, not the lake view. It's the money that comes in and the money that goes out. It's a pump I bought by selling my bracelet. It's a ceiling I repaired twice. It's driving to clean motel rooms so I can afford to rent 2 rooms here. Grant picked up the tax receipt. You paid this already? Yes. What did you use? My money. You're almost out. Yes. Then let me invest. Mara laughed softly. There it is. I'm not asking you to sell. We could form something. I put in cash. We renovate properly. More rooms, better furniture, online bookings. I said no. You haven't heard the terms. The term that matters is we. His face flushed. You'd rather struggle than accept help from me. I accepted help from Cal. I pay him. I accepted help from Inez. I pay her. Dell argued me into charging more. Joanne pays for coffee she could get in town, so charge me. For what? A share. The lodge isn't for sale. Grant put the receipt down. You always do this. Do what? Make being needed into proof that you're right. The words came too close to Denise's warning, and Grant saw it. Mara folded the envelope closed. You may be right about that part, she said. He blinked. I liked being the one Grandma needed, Mara continued. Sometimes I said yes before she finished asking. Sometimes I didn't tell either of you how bad things were because I didn't want you coming in and doing it wrong. Denise absorbed that without defending herself. But I also asked for help, Mara said. You just remember the times I didn't because those are more convenient." Grant's anger lost some of its shape. "I didn't know how to help her," he said. "You could have learned. She never taught me any of this." "Did you ask?" He looked toward the range, the old pans, Ruth's apron. "No," he said. The answer was quiet and honest. It did not repair anything, but it stopped the conversation from becoming another lie. Denise pulled out a chair. "I called you irresponsible," she said to Mara, "every time you missed work for Mother." Mara waited. "I said you couldn't hold a schedule, that you weren't building anything for yourself." Denise rubbed one thumb across the chair back. "Then I called you whenever she needed an appointment moved, a prescription collected, or the furnace looked at. I depended on the exact thing I criticized." Grant glanced at her. "Mom." "No." Denise's voice was calm, but he stopped. "I packed your boxes because the photographer was coming," she continued. "That was true. It was also easier than looking at you in that room and acknowledging what you had done there." Mara's throat tightened. "You asked where you were supposed to go," Denise said. "I had no answer. I knew I had no answer, and I made your anger the problem." The service door opened. Inez leaned in. "Mara, potatoes are approaching a legal definition of charcoal. I'll be there." Inez's eyes moved between the three of them. "I can let them become evidence." 2 minutes. The door closed. Denise touched the stockpot's chipped enamel rim. "I am sorry." Mara had imagined those words often enough that their real shape disappointed her. They did not restore her savings or undo the sight of her boxes at the door. They did not return the mornings when Denise thanked her for helping out and drove home before Ruth's bath. But the apology did not ask Mara to make Denise feel better. That mattered. "I believe you," Mara said. "I'm not finished being angry." "I know. And this place is mine." "Yes." Grant pushed both hands into his coat pockets. "So that's it?" "That's the division you wanted," Denise said. "The saleable pieces for us, the burden for Mara. You got the house, and you got the accounts and cars. I'm not the villain because I accepted what everyone agreed to." "No," Mara said. "You're not. But you don't get to renegotiate because my bad share stopped looking bad." Grant stared at her. From the dining room came a burst of laughter, followed by the unmistakable sound of a mug breaking. Mara flinched. Inez called, "Not mine." Grant almost smiled. Then he looked again at the warm kitchen, the chalkboard, and the baskets of clean towels near the stairs. "I really thought you'd last 6 weeks," he said. "I know. I thought that because I wouldn't have lasted 6 days. The admission was not an apology either. It was perhaps the closest Grant could come while still standing inside his pride. Mara picked up Ruth's apron. "If you want breakfast," she said, "there's room at the end of the table." Grant glanced toward the dining room. "As family? As people who called first next time? And the business?" "Mine." He nodded once. Denise removed her coat. Grant kept his on. "I should go," he said. "Road's clear," Mara replied. At the service door, he stopped and wiped his boots carefully on the mat, though he was leaving rather than entering. "I'll call," he said. Mara did not promise to answer. After Grant's truck disappeared, Denise sat at the end of the long dining room table beside Joanne. Mara served her potatoes, eggs, and toast. Denise tasted the coffee. "This is stronger than Mother's." The table went silent. Inez lowered her fork. "You have chosen violence." Denise smiled into her mug. "I remember Ruth's coffee. I also remember throwing half of it into the snow when she wasn't looking." Dell pointed toward the lake-facing windows. "That explains the dead patch by the porch." The laughter that followed included Mara before she decided whether it should. Denise stayed to wash dishes. She put 2 plates in the wrong bus tub and used too much soap. Mara corrected her without mercy. Nothing between them became easy. It became possible. The townhouse closed that Friday. Denise sent Mara a photograph of the empty bedroom where the hospital bed had stood. Mara looked at it once, then saved it instead of deleting it. Grant did call. The first time, he asked whether she wanted Ruth's socket set, which had ended up beneath tools he claimed. Mara said yes. He brought it the following week and did not mention investing. He paid for coffee, complained about the price, and left $1 in Eddie's informal toast fund. Room 3 reopened after 2 wind-driven storms passed without dampening the new insulation. Mara kept Room 1 for herself. That decision cost her a rentable bed, but the first night she slept there, she understood what Inez meant about building something that could survive her taking a nap. The clean sheets were mismatched. The bedside table still showed a pale sanding mark beneath its finish. Through the window, moonlight lay across the frozen lake. Nobody could ask her to leave the room for a photographer. The lodge remained modest. 3 upstairs rooms had heat, though Mara rented only 2. The office returned to being an office. Several fixtures still bore tags marked closed. Breakfast ran 4 mornings a week unless weather or repairs required otherwise. Mara kept 2 motel shifts because steady income was still steady income. Inez plowed and invoiced every Friday. Cal inspected the circulator, found nothing wrong, and looked personally disappointed. Winter workers came and went. Some nights every usable bed was occupied. Other nights the lodge held only Mara, the ticking radiators, and the wind moving over the lake. Near the end of February, another hard freeze settled over the valley. Mara woke before dawn and carried Ruth's red scarf down to the cellar. She no longer needed the amber lantern. She had repaired the stair light herself. Still, the lantern hung on its hook beside the bulkhead, ready. The thermal supply line entered through the rear stone wall from the wooded slope. Old copper pipes crossed the cellar, beaded with condensation. The new circulator hummed beside the heat exchanger. Pressure held at 14. Mara checked the temperature, touched the supply, then the return. Warmth moved exactly where it should. On the shelf above the workbench sat no treasure, no final message, no explanation Ruth had hidden for the proper moment. There were bent screws, spare valve keys, abrasive cloth, and Cal's pressure gauge waiting to be returned. Upstairs, a guest crossed the dining room. A floorboard creaked. The service kitchen refrigerator started. Mara wrapped the red scarf around her neck and stood for one more moment in the warm cellar. Then she turned off the light and went upstairs.